Por favor, ocupe su asiento.
Bueno, buenas tardes a todas y a
Good
todos.
afternoon,
Vamos a
everyone.
comenzar el primer
Let's
panel de la
begin with the
tarde,
first panel of this
las
afternoon,
prácticas del buen
the
cuidado y su
practices
impacto
of
en la
good
vida de
care
mujeres
and the
rurales.
impact in life
Y para
of
ello voy
rural
a ir
women.
presentando
And to
a
do
las
so,
panelistas a medida
I
que
will
vayan
introduce the
tomando lugar.
panelists as they take the floor.
En primer lugar,
First of all,
la señora Catherine
Mrs.
Sales,
Catherine Sayles,
presidenta de
President
Alza
of
tu Voz de
Raise
Santa
Your
Lucía.
Voice St. Lucia.
No, esta puede tomar la palabra, Catherine.
Catherine, floor is yours.
Okay. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Catherine Silis, and I work with a non-profit organization in St. Lucia called Raise Your Voice. And our work is to provide support services to women and children who are victims of gender-based violence and lack of access to justice. Initially, in between 2012 to 2015, our work focused primarily on advocacy. But after years of advocacy, we realized that women were not going to get the services they needed if we didn't provide it ourselves. So we transitioned from an advocacy organization in 2015 to a support services organization from 2015 to date. So my question today is, why is it important for women farmers and women generally to have care and support services? And care and support services are important for everyone, men, women, children, everybody. We at our organization always prioritize the needs of gender-based violence victims, and we must recognize the fact that female farmers are part of our clients. In the past, we have collaborated with Helen's Daughters to provide care services to their women as well, as they deal primarily with women farmers. Women dealing with trauma from domestic violence in mental health services, including counseling and therapy, to help them recover and rebuild their lives. Sometimes it is extremely hard for women who are female farmers to continue with their daily chores, as they sometimes have broken limbs, broken fingers, broken leg, broken bones, broken ribs through domestic violence. And at that point, care is always important because they require rebuilding and therapy to get them back on their feet. In St. Lucia, as we learned earlier, most small holding farmers are women. They do not own the land. Most of them are maybe family land, maybe crown lands, which belongs to the states. But they are the ones who work tirelessly to feed our small population of 170 to 180,000 people. Many women in vulnerable situations are also primary caregivers for their children, for their elderly parents, or sometimes family, or sometimes people who they feel need care and are not getting care. Putting elderly people in homes is something culturally that people look down upon you for, because they say, okay, you don't want to take care of your elders, you want somebody else to do it. So people try to avoid it. Access to childcare services would enable them to pursue education, training, or employment opportunities, which are critical for their economic independence and long-term stability. But access to childcare services is very expensive, especially for those who does not have a stable income. And for farmers, sometimes who their only livelihoods is to sell their produce by the market, we have a few retail outlets that buy vegetables and fruit from farmers and resell. But the payments are not consistent, and sometimes the waiting period is long. Having child in a daycare requires that every month at the same time you are able to pay the fees. Childcare in St. Lucia is quite expensive as everywhere else, and sometimes it is the beyond the livelihoods which they are earning. In St. Lucia, traditionally, female farmers would sell to the hotels, to the supermarket. The backward and forward linkages at the supermarkets and the hotels are not well developed. So sometimes it takes primarily 90 days for you to collect thing, while you still have to find money to buy seeds, buy seedlings, till the soil and pay farmers. Agricultural work in St. Lucia, while primarily done by women with small holding, it's also quite expensive. It takes about $100 a day for you to be able to get somebody to come and help on the farm, to help you clean up, dig the soil, plant and stuff. And then the rewards from that are not always lining up. So sometimes it's extremely hard for female farmers to be able to maintain that kind of help. Last year, we had a small grant program funded by the Inter-American Foundation, and we selected 20 women from our group of clients to provide small grants to start their farming. They were going on great until we had a climate event, and 2 or 3 of them lost their farms completely, and they had to start from scratch. Women farmers in St. Lucia have a number of challenges outside of care services, including insurance companies do not insure crops. The commercial banks will not provide a loan for a small holding farmer. And even the St. Lucia Development Bank, which is a creature of the government of St. Lucia, would not support a loan because the loan cannot be insured. It is not a level playing field when it comes to women, and it's also not a level playing field when it comes to agriculture. Although we like to comfort ourselves and see that agriculture is what feeds the world, the basket, we provide food for our country, but the underlying foundation and support is not always there. Women who care for the elderly family members or children with special needs often experience financial and emotional strain. Women who have special needs children require to have them assessed at a cost so that they can be put in public education system. They also need to provide a full-time carer at the public education system if the child is to attend, because the teacher will tell you they are not caregivers, they are teachers, they do not have time to pay attention to a special needs child. So this burden always falls on parents. Culturally, we always say a single parent, we never ask, where is the father of this child? So the burden always falls on a woman to provide food, to provide clothing, to provide education, to provide medical support, and everything else that comes with bearing a child. Care services that provide relief or support in these areas would greatly reduce their burden and allow them more flexibility to engage in personal development or work. It is not by coincidence that most of our female farmers who choose farming are not economically empowered, does not have the capacity to do a number of things, including recording the income, recording the harvest, recording the cultivation, because going into farming means all your time is spent farming and providing care, and you do not have the time to build personal capacity. By offering essential services, we as an organization, we try to ensure that we empower female farmers. So we provide life skills training. We provide training so that they can document their production, they can document their income, because the usual outcry from the financial institution is that farmers generally, female farmers in particular, do not have any records to show that they actually make money from farming. So they do not usually qualify for loans. So last year, we were able to do a pilot project to make sure that women understood and were trained on how to not only to provide care for themselves, but how to document their work both in a financial manner and the number of crops they produce, the number of pounds of produce they have, so that when they go to the financial institution, they can provide this information. We have had a number of issues trying to strengthen the capacity of women who are in agriculture, simply because women who are in agriculture are just women in agriculture. So they will grow the crops, they will sit by the market on a Saturday, they will sell it while taking care of the child by them, while worrying about if the elderly parent at home is okay, while worrying about the household, while worrying about how they send in the children to school. How do you visit the family member or child who is at the hospital? It is a burden that has been placed on women. And I think that the conversation has started on how can we provide better support for women who are female farmers and women in general, which does not, and I say that with a little
Catherine,
bit of, I say that with a little
necesitamos
bit of,
ir cerrando porque vamos en 10 minutos y eran 3.
You have 10, you only have 10 minutes and we are running out of time.
Okay. Oh, that time can be that. Okay, so in conclusion, we want to say that we have sat here and discussed the need for proper support services and care for women. So let us not let the conversation die here. Let us all put effort into making sure that women receive the care they need and the support they need from various organizations, governments, and institutions who are concerned about their health and well-being. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Catherine.
Thank you, Catherine, and apologies for interrupting you. I know we're a little bit late with the agenda, so I'm going to ask President authorization to expand minutes to make this equitable and to have more people instead of cutting the presentation. So now let me introduce Mrs. Elba Mariela Moreno. She is the care room coordinator of the Cooperativa Gallo Rojo in Argentina in the province of Córdoba.
Ahora sí.
Okay.
Bueno, en principio os quiero agradecer por
First of
la
all, I want to thank
invitación,
for the invitation,
y le quiero dar un saludo a
and I
vuestros
want to
representantes
greet
de los
everyone
rurales,
and rural women, particularly my colleagues from the cooperative,
a mi mamá Elba.
my mother Elba, my daughter Angeles.
De no ser por su apoyo, no estaría
Without their
aquí.
support, I wouldn't be here.
Cuidando
She is taking care of my production,
de mis hijos,
my
y el
children,
espacio que tenemos
and the
comunitario
space, the community
allá
space we
en el
have
lugar.
in our place.
Bueno,
Okay,
soy parte de la
I am part of the organization,
cooperativa
my
Gallo
cooperative
Rojo,
called Gallo
ubicada en un
Rojo,
paraje
located on a rural area
en un paraje rural de la provincia de
and a
Córdoba,
rural
capital,
area of the province of Córdoba
en el centro de Argentina.
and downtown Argentina. Our cooperative groups families from the region. Most of them are women. Most of us are women, care providers and producers of different ages, ranging from 20 and 68 years old. Also mothers, most of us are mothers and single mothers as well. We are representatives of a part of the population of rurality or family agriculture and popular economy that produces safe food and contributes to food safety.
Somos productoras de pollo
We
cordero,
are a producer of
ponedoras y
chickens
de
laying
campo,
hens raised in the field
y
and the
también
rural
alimento
area,
balanceado.
and balanced food as well.
Bueno, nuestra organización
Our organization
empezó allá por el
started
2003 con un festejo
by
del Día del
2003
Niño
with a celebration of the
y
Children's
bueno,
Day,
personas que
and
fueron ahí
people
a
that
contribuir a este
went
festejo,
there to contribute to this
este lugar,
celebration,
la
like the
gente,
place, the people,
sobre todo
and
con
particularly
al ver las necesidades de los
when
niños y
seeing
todo
the
eso,
children's needs,
entonces se decidió hacer
it
una
was
salita
decided to create
comunitaria
a community room
que cuenta ahora con luz eléctrica
that
y
has
un baño
power
incluido.
and one restroom.
Ahí empezamos a
So there
organizarnos
we started getting organized,
y bueno,
and
empezar a trabajar y
we
tratar
started
de ver
working and
las
trying to
soluciones
see
para
the solutions for
la necesidad de la
different
comunidad.
requirements.
Un poco nerviosa, perdón.
I'm a little bit nervous. My
Tranquila, Eva, que
apologies.
está saliendo
No
fantástico.
worries, you're
Bueno,
doing
gracias.
great. Thank you.
Me emociono rápido también. así que
I get excited very soon as well.
bueno, es un espacio físico
It is
de
a
encuentro y
physical
cuidado
space of
comunitario,
encounter and community care,
entendiendo ese tipo de cuidado como
understanding
una
this
buena
type of care
práctica
as
porque
a good
cuidamos a los
practice
chicos
because we take care
y
of
los
children
cuidamos entre
and we
todos.
take care of all of us, among
Entendemos que esta
ourselves.
forma de
We
cuidar que
understand
tenemos
that
es una
this
buena
way to take
práctica
care is a good
porque arranca
practice
desde las
because it starts
necesidades
from the
de los
needs,
chicos y las
the
familias
children's and their families'
y
needs.
también por ahí lo
And
hacemos con
also we
algunos
do
adultos
this
mayores.
with some senior
Entonces
people
ahí es
as
un
well.
espacio de
The
encuentro,
room
de
is a space
estudio,
of
de trabajo,
encounter,
cuidado,
study,
de todo un poco.
work, and care. A little
Porque
bit of
cuidar es
everything,
todo.
because care is
Por
everything.
ejemplo,
For example,
espacios de encuentro
a space of encounter
cooperativo.
of the cooperative.
Ahí nosotros nos reunimos
There we meet
cada semana
every
para
week
organizar la
to
producción,
organize
tomar
production, to
decisiones,
make decisions,
avanzar, organizar
to
las
progress,
ventas,
to organize the
huevos.
sales of eggs.
Estamos muy fortalecidos como
We
grupo
are strengthened as a
y
group,
somos muy activos en la
and we are
comunidad.
very active in the community.
Después contamos con un
We
espacio de
have
salud.
a space of
Vienen
health.
médicos
Some
especialistas, atienden una
expert
vez al año
physicians come
y sobre
once a
todo a los
year
niños les
to
hacemos
take care of
vacunación,
children
control
and
de
they
peso, crecimiento.
control weight, growth,
También
vaccination.
se
And
solicita algún turno
we
si lo
also
necesita en algún
ask
hospital.
a shift in a hospital if needed.
También contamos
We have
con un circuito de salud para las mujeres.
a circuit loop of
que también
health for women.
se les da un turno a
So we
cada
give a
mujer,
shift to each
se hace un
woman,
chequeo completo
and they follow a full
análisis,
control with
radiografía,
gynecologists
de todo el lugar.
and other studies once a year.
Por lo general
Normally,
se hace eso en el
we
domicilio
do
porque
this
donde
at
nosotros
home
estamos,
because where we are
estamos en una zona rural,
in a
lejos de
rural
la ciudad,
area, we are far away from the
y
city,
contamos con un transporte
and we
de larga
have a
distancia
long distance transport
y muy alto el costo
service,
del boleto. Entonces
but the cost is
en
high.
razón de acá serían como
So
unos $12
that will be
de
some
vuelta.
12 US dollars
Entonces cuesta mucho pagar ese
two-way
boleto para
ticket. So
ir
it is expensive for us to
constantemente.
pay
Entonces se
this. So
hace
the idea is to have just one a year.
Después tenemos actividades
We
culturales
have
y
cultural
recreativas.
and recreational activities as well.
Organizamos clases
We
de danza,
organize
folclore,
dance
festejos
classes,
infantiles, Día de la
folklore,
Mujer,
the,
el 8
the
de
day,
marzo,
Children's
Día de la
Day, the
Madre,
Women's Day, the
nuestro
Mother's
domingo que
Day
viene, allá en
is next
Argentina.
Sunday in Argentina.
También hacemos cine
We
y
also
todo
make
eso sale de
movies and
nosotros mismos
what
porque
we get
sí
from us
no,
because
en mi caso no tenemos estudios
in my case,
terminados,
we have not concluded
entonces
our studies,
no tenemos
so we do
preparación para
not have
trabajar en sí, pero
studies to work.
todo lo que hacemos lo hacemos
But
prácticamente
everything we do
de corazón y lo mejor que
is from the
podemos.
bottom of our heart and the
Tenemos la
best
experiencia
possible
con nuestros
manner.
propios
We
hijos,
have
entonces, bueno,
experience with our
tratamos de
children,
transmitir todo
so we
eso a
try
las
to
niñas
transmit
que
all this to the other
necesitan
children that
que
need
necesitan,
to play,
bueno, muchas
that
cosas
need
que
many
necesitan
things that I will explain in a while.
también para mantener esas
To
actividades
keep
hacemos
these
quizás bocina
activities,
por ahí
we
cerca de
make
festejos comunitarios.
bingos and
En
lotteries.
diciembre nos reunimos
In
todas las familias
December,
del
the
cooperativo
families of the cooperative
a fin de
meet
año,
by the end of the
donde
year,
cada uno
and
de los
there each
compañeros
colleague
hace su plato típico,
cooks
mitad
native dish because we are half Argentinian, half from Bolivia. We work in conjunction, and we also have some care space. We provide school support. So we give a snack to the children. We work with them for their homework, with their homework. They are in a safe space and they receive the snack or the lunch. We have received up to 30 children ranging from 6 to 11 years old. Some of them have arrived up to the university, not too many. Some people have concluded the primary education, impossible for them to continue in the secondary high school. So the important thing is that we created this among all of us. My mom gave up part of her land to build the room, and we maintain it among the neighbors and colleagues. And with some contributions from the municipality, $100 that we use for milk, the bread for the week. And when possible, we buy some or basic things for to work in the room. All this is a volunteer work, and we have the support of the neighbors that help us. One cooks, the other one takes care of the children, the other one works with the homework. We exchange and we share activities to avoid losing the space and to give necessary useful to the area. Okay, that's it. Questions?
Muchas gracias, Elba.
Thank
Ahora
you,
cuando
Elba. Questions at the end.
terminemos las exposiciones,
When after
compañeras,
the
vienen las
presentation of the
preguntas.
colleagues, we're going to have the question and answer
Ya
part.
pasó, ya pasó. Unos nervios así.
So
Ya pasó.
it's over. You did it well.
Vamos a presentar
Let
a
me
la señora
introduce
Gretel Rojas.
Mrs.
Ella
Gretel
es
Rojas.
coordinadora de la
She
Casa
is
de
the
la
coordinator
Alegría,
of Casa de la Alegría,
Copetarazú, creo que lo
Copetarazú
dije
in
bien,
Costa
en
Rica.
Costa Rica. Bueno, buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. And my position as coordinator and leader of a social project like Casa de la Alegría, it is important to participate in this enriching space. I want to thank AICA for the invitation. It's good to share with so many women that are looking for our rights. Casa de la Alegría are a project of social responsibility, which is part of the support provided to people involved in coffee activities. Partners from Copetarazú, coffee growers, coffee pickers, and we have a care network for minors. The Casas de la Alegría are a direct and effective answer to the risk of child work in the coffee plantations. This project is created after observing different activities with coffee growers and talking to them and how to improve their conditions. So we provide the protection conditions and care for minors, thinking in the best interest of the child and mitigating the child work. Because of this need and as our committing as cooperatives since 2018, we developed the project of Casas de la Alegría in different communities of the region. Right now, we provide this in 20 communities, providing safe and proper space to children of coffee pickers, and they are not exposed to an accidents in the coffee plantations. It's designed for children from 0 to 12 years old, but the work of children up to 15 years old is forbidden. Casa de la Alegría have a staff trained, the cooker and the caregivers. They take care for children to receive food, educational activities while their parents are picking up the grain. It is important to mention that the conditions of children in health are improved. In case of an incident of a disease, we improve their food conditions. They receive 4 or 5 food times, better educational support, among other things. Casa de la Alegría are a free project. People involved in coffee collection can benefit. We have 3 nationalities: Costa Ricans, Nicaraguans, and indigenous people. Year after year, we have been working in raising awareness for the producer and picker about the importance of Casa de la Alegría. This project is fully led by women from the logistic of coordination up to the transfer of furniture, which is behind many jobs that sometimes we do not see. This is fully developed by women. The project is constituted by 60 women, more or less, many of them housewives. It is an important task, but it is unpaid and it did not receive the real value it deserves. So that's why many women try to develop laborally, personally, and economically. Although, as have been mentioned, the economic income for women has a marked difference compared to men's in position with responsibilities and decision making are similar but less paid. It is vital to make a change in the concept that women has to be home, taking care of of her partner, children, and to give strength to the female leadership in order to have a better voice and participation with equal conditions. I emphasize in the importance developed by women in the project of Casa de la Alegría, fully led by women with a noticeable growth, and this is developed and this woman in order to continue getting empowered. We need much to do much more, but these spaces are key to success. The development of this project wouldn't be possible without the group of women that have the desire to become empowered and struggling to be visible. Women empowerment implies participation in spaces like this, where we can see there are more and more women that join this struggle. It is important to mention that in this project we focus on migrant mothers and girls. We are working in conjunction with institutions to provide trainings and workshops in order to promote their rights, and where we can change this way of thinking that male are superior than women. These mothers, at the end of the harvest that normally lasts 3 months, they come back to their countries. But we're proud to know that we're trying to empower them and to struggle for equal conditions. To lead such an important project in the coffee sector, Casa de la Alegría help us to give equal opportunities and rights to women. This is the aim. Thank you, Gretel. Now let's give the floor to Irene Fonseca Echeverría, Secretary of the Fundación San Isidro from Colombia.
Listo, ahora sí. Bueno, muchas
Okay,
gracias por la
thank you for the
oportunidad
opportunity
compartir
to
estos
share
espacios
these
tan importantes
such
para las
important
mujeres y
spaces
sobre
for
todo para las
women,
mujeres
and
rurales.
particularly for
Gracias
rural
a
women.
ICA
Thanks to
por
ICA
darse la pela
for
de celebrar estos
celebrating
encuentros,
these
a su equipo
encounters
técnico, a
to
su
its technical
coordinadora,
team,
sus
the
lectoras,
coordinator,
sus compañeras,
director, colleagues
representantes de la
that are representatives of the
institucionalidad de los diferentes
institutionality from
países, a
different
las
countries,
compañeras lideresas
the leader colleagues,
rurales,
little
a los
rural
señores
colleagues,
que hoy nos
the
acompañan
gentlemen that
bueno, en
accompany us
general,
today.
gracias a
In
todos y
general,
todas.
thanks to everyone.
Contarles un poquito qué
Let
es
me
la
tell you a
Fundación
little
San
bit
Isidro.
about
La
what
es una
Fundación San
fundación,
Isidro
no una
is. It is a
asociación. La
foundation,
Fundación
not
San
an
Isidro
association. This
adquiere su personería
foundation
jurídica en
gets its
1980,
legal
es decir, que
identity
tiene
since the
44
80s, so
años
44
de
years
trabajo
of
con
existence,
comunidades
working with
campesinas y
farmer
rurales,
and rural communities,
acentuando su trabajo en los derechos humanos,
emphasizing the work in human rights
la equidad de
and
género,
gender
en la
equity,
incidencia política
political
y
incidents,
en la construcción de una
and they
sociedad
create
de
the
paz.
construction of a peaceful
Bueno,
society.
en medio de este
In the
trabajo,
middle of this
voy a hacerles
work,
como un
I'm
rápido
going to give you a
overview
quick overview
del tiempo que hemos
of the
estado
time we
trabajando
have
estas
been
prácticas de
working
cuidado.
in these care
En el
practices.
2010
In the year 2010,
bueno, en el
well, in
2008,
2008,
bueno, nosotros veníamos de un
so
proceso
we
que
came
se
from
llamaba
a
mercados
process called
campesinos, se llamaba
farmer
mercados campesinos de la
markets
región central,
of the central
donde las
region.
mujeres,
There, women.
bueno, el objetivo de este
So the purpose
proceso
of
era
this process
visibilizar
was
la
to
importancia de la
make visible the
producción
importance
de los
of production
campesinos y
of
campesinas en lo que es
male and
para la
female
soberanía
farmers
alimentaria
for the food
de los
sovereignty
territorios
of
y de
the
las grandes
territories
urbes
and
de
large
del
cities
país.
of the
Dentro de esas
country.
participábamos en los
So we
mercados campesinos de
participated in
Bogotá y las
Bogota's
mujeres pues
farmer markets, and women in that space could sell their products and to strengthen their economy, to strengthen their empowerment, the economic empowerment. But we realized that in exchange of what? They were doing this work. They get up early at 1 a.m. and they came back at midnight. The previous day, they had to prepare their products or harvest their products, to clean them, to package them pretty well, and to take them to the capital city. The process was an enriching process, and nice, but we were also looking how this affected farmer women. So with that, we thought that we needed to do something. So we started the project with the cooperation of Oxfam International to develop some workshops and encounters that will provide reflection and research spaces on how these women were assuming this overburdening. Amazing results. We included men and women. And one of these reflections, men that assisted, because there is a reluctancy of men to participate in these spaces. Those who participated were amazed. I didn't know that my wife did so this work and that I could help with that task. That was beneficial. Even the women themselves, they didn't realize that they have an overburden without the need, because they could redistribute this task with the members of the house. So they did this automatically because they had to and because they were women. So because of that, and the San Isidro Foundation gets involved in other articulations, in other spaces of national articulation, which is the intersectoral group of economy of care and the national platform of political advocacy, in order to direct public policies, structural public policies that will provide a real solution to this problem of overburdening in women, in rural women.
We started that battle from an intersectoral group and with our platform on political influence. And in 2010, we passed a law with other women's organizations working, of course, but we feel that we also did our part, and it was very important. So we managed to have this law passed, Law 1413, in 2010. This law obligates one of the ministries to quantify the time women spent and to use to perform the time use survey. So that was the first. It was not enough for that first survey.
Las mujeres rurales en Colombia
And it
trabajan
said that rural women in Colombia work 8 hours and 35 minutes, and men work 3 hours and 15 minutes. So we see the big difference.
Con relación a lo urbano
And
también hay
that's
una
just
brecha
looking at
bastante grande.
the rural side. In the urban areas, we also have gaps.
Nos dice también que el aporte que hacemos al Producto
It
Interno
says that
Bruto es
the
del
contribution that
21%,
we make to the
mucho
GDP is
más de lo que
28%,
el
much
país
more
gana en
than
las-
what the country
en
makes
las- con las exportaciones,
with
¿no?
exports.
Entonces es significativo
So it's
lo que aportamos
significant.
las mujeres en cuanto a
The
trabajo de
contribution of
cuidado y
women
además
in
no
terms of care
remunerado.
work, and this is all unpaid work.
Otro logro bien importante que tuvimos es, bueno, esa ley 1413
Something
nos
important as
es una
well,
de
Law
otras para
1413
seguir insistiendo
helped
en
us
generar un sistema nacional de cuidado
create
que
a
diera
national system, a
real
national care
solución,
system
no
to
solamente
provide
al
real
cuidado de
solutions
personas, al cuidado individual,
to
sino que
caring
diera
for people,
solución
individual
también
care, but
a,
also
y que reconociera el cuidado
acknowledging
comunitario y
community
el
care
cuidado bueno, grupal que se
and
hace en las
group care
comunidades, ¿no?
performed in different
Entonces,
communities.
bueno, tuve la fortuna de ser parte del comité
I was lucky
asesor
enough
del
to be
Sistema
part of the
Nacional de
advisory
Cuidado,
committee,
del COMPES, para el
committee
Sistema
of
Nacional de
this
Cuidado. Y bueno,
national
nosotras siempre
care
ahí
system,
machacando, tenemos que
and
darle
we have been
reconocimiento a
working
ese
hard.
trabajo que hasta ahora
We
ha sido
try to acknowledge
invisibilizado y
all this work that was invisible before and that helps us sustain life and also ensures women can produce food, trade and sell food, and for this to also be acknowledged as part of care work. The care system also has added value because it tries to ensure support and strengthening of community care, community work that had not been considered a part of care or as work. So, for example, midwives, Afro-descendant communities provide this type of care as midwives, and that's also related to sustaining life. Then we also have community orchards, community lunchrooms, caring for ecosystems, the forms of production. At Fundación San Isidro, we've always tried to focus on ecological production, trying to transform our production into more ecological, less chemical. They called us crazy at first, but now we have many crazy people in the world, in our country as well. In 2023, social organizations continued pressuring, and so our constitutional court passed a ruling. I forgot the number or the name of the ruling. It's 582 of 2023, declaring care as a fundamental right to uphold and sustain life. And not just the care of humans, but also non-humans. It's very important for society to recognize, protect, and strengthen community care within each territory's worldview, each community's worldview. Indigenous women have much to teach us in that sense, but we also need the state to provide tools to continue that work. So vital for life. I think I went over time, sorry.
Gracias, Irene. Claramente, sé que estamos
Thank you,
restendidos con los
Irene.
horarios.
I know that we are running over time,
Pero
and
bueno, sé que y entiendo que todas las
but I
compañeras
also
tienen
understand
mucho
that
para
everyone
decir,
has so
mucho
much
para
to
contar, y
say,
no siempre se dan estas
and you
oportunidades
don't
para
always
ellas
have the
de
chance to
poder
be
estar
heard
hablando sobre sus
and to
experiencias y
share
sus
your
vivencias
experiences,
ante tantas autoridades. O sea, realmente entiendo las
especially
ganas de hablar, por
with
eso me
the authorities
permito
present. I understand that you
dejarlas un
want to
ratito y no interrumpirlas, así que todo bien, Irene.
speak
Bueno,
so
vamos
much, so I try not to
eh,
interrupt.
con Paula, la
Now we
señora
have Paula.
Paula Candy Jiménez.
Paula
Ella es
Candy
gestora de
Jimenez. She's
proyectos
project manager
colectivo de empleadas
of
domésticas de los Altos de
the
Chiapas y
group
suplente
of
del juez
domestic workers
rural
in Alto de
en
Chiapas and
México.
alternate rural judge in Mexico.
Ya está, ¿verdad? Sí. Bueno, pues antes que nada, gracias por esta
First of all,
invitación.
thank you
Estoy
very
muy
much for
agradecida
inviting me.
con
I am
todos,
truly very, very
de veras que
grateful,
agradecida de
more than
conocerlos.
grateful, and it's wonderful to
Ya
see
soy
everyone
fan de
here.
varias de
I'm a
ustedes,
fan of several of you
de
already.
veras, ya soy su fan.
I'm really
Bueno,
very,
las buenas
very
prácticas de
excited.
cuidado.
Good
Voy a
care
hablar un
practices.
poquito desde nuestro
I
colectivo.
will talk about our group,
¿Quiénes somos?
our
Nosotras somos un
collective. We
colectivo de
are
mujeres
a group
trabajadoras del
of
hogar,
women
todas
that
de
work
diferentes
at home
municipios de los
in different
Altos de Chiapas,
municipalities
México.
of Alto de
En su
Chiapas in
mayoría
Mexico.
todas mujeres indígenas.
Most of us are indigenous women.
Dentro del empleo doméstico está contemplado el
Domestic
trabajo
work
de cuidados
includes
y
care
sigue
work,
siendo
and
invalorizado.
it is
¿Por
still
qué?
not
Porque
valued. We are hired to clean a house, but on the side, we also have to take care of a child. And let's go ahead and take a look at the elderly sick mother or father that lives there as well. So that's where we're working on both care work and housework. And it's undervalued because they don't tell us that because we're going to take care of the child and the elderly person, we'll pay extra. No, nothing like that. So if we want to have good practices, we have to take care of ourselves. We have to be well, to do well with ourselves, know about our rights. And part of our rights, we have a right to rest and co-responsibility or joint responsibility. Many times our rural indigenous colleagues do not know this. They're just not aware of it. Or other circumstances, we can later discuss that. The value of our work has to be first something we acknowledge ourselves, and we have to take care of ourselves. We can do this by learning as much as we can. And for that, we have shared in different workshops for gender violence, domestic violence. We also help our indigenous colleagues that do not read, that have never been in a classroom, that don't, that never went to kindergarten, and much less higher grades. A solidary economy, that's something we also work with our indigenous colleagues. Also, remembering our mother tongues. Many of us have lost our native tongues and we want to recover them. Medicinal plants. With rural indigenous women, we have so much knowledge. They know so much. And it's sometimes scary to see how much they know, really. Domestic violence, gender-based violence. Of course, unfortunately, that's the most prevalent. In my community, we have very terrible forms of violence. And we also provide workshops on healthy eating and healthy food. We take care of children in our organization. So when we provide a workshop, for example, on one of these topics, we also get organized so we can take care of the children for them to come to the workshops. That's how care continues. If I want a woman to come and learn and to come to my workshop, she'll say, I'm sorry, Pao, I can't do it. I have a small child. Then we say, no, go ahead and bring them. Once you're here, we'll get organized and we'll take care of them. And that way you can be here in the workshop, and we want you to be fully present, not just in your body, but in your mind. Our work also helps us remember what our original forms of care were like, that we take care of our foods and that we don't fall to the trap of agrochemicals. When we talk about healthy food, we're talking about vegetables with no chemicals. Because if you have chemicals, I'm sorry if it's my ignorance, but it's not healthy anymore. If we talk about healthy food, the animals have to be ranch animals, as we call them. That means that they don't need feed. If you say that you have poultry, but you're feeding them animal feed, then you are again in that same negative system of agrochemicals. There's also a lack of value or evaluating orchard work of women, having corn, beans, pork, poultry, ducks. The way we harvest the land, because of our knowledge and contact with Mother Earth, where we have everything, none of that is valued. Rural indigenous women have a connection to the earth. We ask Mother Earth to give us everything. If we're going to plant corn, if we're going to plant beans, we have to take contact first and ask for permission. We don't just throw the seeds. So we have a different worldview, our indigenous worldview. We have a very different worldview.
Solo quiero, bueno, quiero hablar mucho, pero
I
sé
want
que
to
no
say so
puedo.
much. I know I don't have the time.
Perdón, es que
I
yo sí soy de hablar
apologize.
mucho,
I really
pero
like to
hoy
talk.
ando así como amarrada
And
porque
I
no
feel
puedo
so
hablar
held
más.
back. I can't talk as much as I'd
Solo
like.
comentar también
So
que
just to
en
say
el
something
COVID
else, during COVID
eh,
times,
muchas comunidades,
many
muchas
communities
comunidades, personas de comunidades
and many
indígenas
people from our indigenous
lograron
communities
sobrevivir más
managed
que en
to
ciudades.
survive
Y
more
quizás
than in
esto es
cities.
porque la
And that
alimentación
is
es
probably
diferente,
because we have a
porque
different
nosotros
way of
producimos nuestra comida.
eating, of
Porque
producing our
del corral
food.
del gallinero
Because
traigo
from
una
my
gallina, me la
backyard, I
mato y me la
bring a
como.
chicken
Y
and
no
I
voy al
eat it. I don't go to
supermercado
the
donde ya los pollos
supermarket
están inyectados,
where you
llenos de
have
aire y
chicken
de
that are
hidro
chicks
algo,
that are
ya ni me acuerdo
all
cómo se llama.
injected with air or hydro
Entonces,
something. I don't even remember the name.
porque en una comunidad
Because in a
se manejan otros modos de
community,
cuidado y
we
de
have other
alimentación.
forms
Para
of
nosotros, la
eating,
tierra
of
nos
caring for
proporciona los
ourselves.
alimentos
The
y
earth
como
gives us
son
our food,
cuidados en la casa
and
son sanos.
because they
Hay
are
personas
homemade,
que
they're
saben y
they're healthy.
conocen de
People
hierbas
know
y ellos
about
fueron quienes nos
herbs and
cuidaron.
plants, and they took
Eso
care of
quiero
us.
recalcar.
That's also
A
important to
nosotras nos
remember.
cuidaron todas las
We also were
mujeres
cared
que
for
tienen un
by all the
conocimiento
women that
ancestral de
have
hierbas
this ancient
y nos
knowledge
cuidaron y
on the
nos dieron
land
el
and plants.
tratamiento
They cared for us, they
y
gave
nos
us
envolvieron
treatment,
en colchas para la
and they
calentura,
covered
de
us
veras.
when we needed
Entonces,
it.
las mujeres tenemos todo un sistema
So
de
women
cuidados
have all this
impresionantes.
impressive system of
¿Sí?
care, really.
Entonces, ¿qué necesitamos decirle a la
What we
mujer?
need to do
Que se lo crea.
is tell women
¿Y
to
cuál es la
believe in
obligación de
themselves.
nosotras que
And
estamos
our
aquí presentes?
obligation, for those of us who are here
Empoderar a
today,
nuestras
we
mujeres
have to
de
empower
nuestras
our women
comunidades.
in our
Yo vengo
communities.
representando una
I
comunidad
come here
y me está
representing one
costando
community,
entrar en mi
and it's
propia
hard to
comunidad.
do it in my own
Pero como
community.
venía platicando aquí con
But
mi
as I was
secretaria
sharing
Gabriela,
with my secretary,
¿qué
Gabriela,
pierdo?
I have
Ya
to
no
do
voy a
it.
perder nada.
I
Ya
have
pasé el
nothing to
COVID.
lose. We've already survived
Sí,
COVID
y hasta la primera y la segunda
and
secuela
even
del
the
COVID.
first and
Y
second
aquí sigo.
wave, and here I
Pues
am.
ya que voy a perder,
Well, since I'm here,
echarle,
then let's go
echémosle,
ahead.
compañeras.
Let's
Esto
move
es
forward. That's the only thing
vamos,
we can do.
quizás en el pasito de huevito,
And even if it's
pero
at the
vamos.
very, very small steps
Gracias.
that we can take, we're taking them. Thank you.
Bueno, qué difícil hacer un poquito un
Well, it's
resumen
hard
de
to
estas
summarize
experiencias,
all your different
pero
experiences.
me anoté
I
un
did
par de
write
cosas de
down
cada una
a few
que me
words
parecen
from
que son
each that
importantes
I
poner en
thought
valor. Catherine
were
habló
worth
de algo muy
highlighting.
importante
Catherine
que
referred to
muchas
something
veces
so
queda
important that
como soslayado
many
a
times
un tema
is
tabú, sobre todo, que es el tema de
even
la
seen
salud
as
mental en las
a
mujeres rurales.
taboo, which is
Y
mental
el
health
apoyo que
for
se
women
necesita desde los
and
estados
the
en
support we
los
need
sistemas de salud
by states
para
within
reconstruir a
healthcare
una mujer
systems
que
to
fue
help
víctima de
rebuild a woman that
violencia
was a victim of violence,
violencias varias, no
of all
solamente física,
forms of
violencias
violence, not
emocionales,
just
violencias
physical, but
económicas, el
emotional,
daño que eso
economic
hace en
violence,
las
and the
estructuras
damage this
y
creates
cómo eso
in
se
all
perpetúa
structures, and
después
how this can be
también a
perpetuated
nuestras hijas, a nuestros
and brought
hijos.
down to our
Entonces,
children.
creo que ese es un punto
So that's a
importantísimo
very
que
important
ella
point
mencionó.
she mentioned.
Elba dijo algo
Elba
que su organización nació en un
said
festejo
that
del Día del
her
Niño.
organization
Y
was
esto es poner en valor
founded on the
las,
Children's Day,
los espacios
and
que nos
that is just
convocan
a
a
way to
festejar
really
algo,
bring
lo que
value
sea,
to
que son
the
esos espacios
spaces, the
donde nos
venues that bring us
encontramos
together to
y donde
celebrate, the
terminan
times when we
surgiendo
uh,
propuestas
are
maravillosas
here
que
united
después
and we have
desencadenan
wonderful
en
proposals that
una cooperativa de
then lead
trabajo,
to
con
a
espacio de
cooperative
cuidado,
for
con
work
perspectiva de
with a
género y
gender-based
con
approach
con una
and
fuerte convicción política por
with this
cambiar
strong
eso.
political
Pero nace
conviction,
desde un
but
espacio
starting
donde
from
había
a
disfrute.
time of
Y eso
enjoyment
también
and
es
celebration.
importante
That's also
rescatarlo
important
porque
to
si no parece
remember,
que estamos todo
because
el
if
tiempo a la
not, we always feel
defensiva
that we
y
are
que estamos todo el tiempo
defending ourselves all
respondiendo.
the
Y
time
sin
and
embargo, muchas
fighting
veces
all the
hasta en
time.
estos
And
espacios donde
even in
parece
these
que no estamos haciendo
spaces and
nada, porque
venues when
tenemos
it
la
seems
cara
like we're
encima que parece
not
que no
doing
estamos haciendo
anything,
nada,
because
estamos
it might seem
construyendo
like we're not,
ruralidad y
we
estamos
are
construyendo
building
feminismo y
rural
eso es
areas. We are building
importantísimo.
feminism, and that's so important.
Gretel nos habló
Gretel
de
told
algo ya
us
un poco más
about
organizado, porque
a more
incluye a los
organized aspect,
productores
which
como
includes
parte del sistema,
producers
¿no?
as
Pero
part of the
también
system.
con poniendo en valor la
And
prevención
also
y lo
remembering
importante desde el lugar de
prevention and
cuidado
how
para
important
prevenir
it
el
is
trabajo
to have
infantil. Algo
areas of
que
care and to
también
prevent
es
child
un
labor.
eje de
a very important pillar of women's agendas. And sometimes it's hard for us because we have so much, and it's hard to remember everything we have to bring to the table. That was very important. And how, by raising awareness with producers, we can find common venues so that men can also be part of this. And we have to work with masculinities, which is another stage of our fight. Irene told us that one man said that he wasn't aware that women worked so much. And the fact that many times we ourselves don't realize how overburdened we are physically and emotionally by taking on so many chores. And I have to remember this because it's just a matter of raising awareness and how we work in our grassroots organizations. It's like, oh, it's always been that way. That's the way it is. I'm used to it. You know, it is what it is. We have to really raise awareness and see that it's not right. It's not good to work twice as much. It's not good to take everything on yourself. It's not good from any standpoint. Because when we say, or we can say, that is not okay, and when we raise awareness, we then also give permission to rest and to help our mind focus on other matters. And then Paula, what can I say? She said it herself with joy. I just met Paula, but I have to say that she has joy in sharing everything, even the hardest stories have some form of joy for her. I know that's not easy. It's not always something we can do to bring joy to this, but it is a wonderful tool that women have to survive in pain and in spite of pain and to survive the difficult spaces we have had to survive. I also want to add 2 or 3 points from everything we've heard today. There's been a lot of talk on joint responsibility, but when we talk about ancient knowledge and the environment, we don't talk about joint responsibility. That seems to be a task for women, and we can't just say that women are the sole responsible people to care for the environment. So we also have to talk about shared responsibilities, joint responsibilities everywhere, not just in care, not just in food production. Taking care of the environment is a joint responsibility for all. So again, without wanting to, we are reproducing discourse without fully analyzing them. And we see that when we're talking about care and overburdening, we are overburdening ourselves. So again, this is part of the agenda for public policies and for the organizations that are present here. We have to talk about joint responsibility in all areas, not just care. And then to understand and remember that it's always a matter of organization, that the examples of the 5 women we've met today, and I have to congratulate them because I know you have to be very, very brave to come from the field and come here and sit down with the authorities and ministers and directors and knowing that even if it might be hard to speak up and that you're nervous, but that you're the true testimony of what happens in the territories. If we forget grassroots organizations, we're lost. Each of them are validated by all of the women behind them. It's not that we had a social media campaign so in vogue today and that validates them. No, what validates them is their work, knowing that there are so many women that when they go back to their countries, they will be embraced and they will be proud to have been here. And the fact that they were here shows the others that all of them can. And so our obligation for those of us who have the possibility of being here or the privilege of being here, no matter what path brought us here, we have the responsibility of ensuring that next time each one of them can come with 2 or 3 more, even if it's just one of them speaking, because we have to show women all over the territories that these venues are areas we have to take ownership of, because we don't have public policies without women that are organized and pushing for things to happen. If not, it's just pretty ideas, but empty words that might sound nice and politically correct. And you hear this in several fora, but then when you go back, it's all the same. So I think this is a commitment we have to assume. We have to take it on. Thanks to ICA for opening the doors. That's not something common either. And we have to open the doors and sit with each other. Women representing their communities and ministers hearing them. I think this is the right way, and let's go for it, as I heard from several women here. Thank you.
Hola. Hola, hola. Bueno, muy buenas tardes a todas.
Hi, everyone. Good
Mi nombre es
afternoon.
Marcela
I
Ávila,
am
soy
Marcela Ávila. I'm a
especialista en el
specialist
programa de equidad, género y
on
juventud.
gender
Un gusto y
equality
un
and
honor
youth.
estar acá.
It's an
También fue
honor
un
and a
reto
pleasure to be here.
moderar este
It's
siguiente
also a
panel
challenge to
después de
moderate
la
this
excelente
panel after
intervención
the
que hemos
wonderful
tenido durante
words we've
todo el día.
heard all day.
La metodología de este panel, que es
For
titulado
this panel
Experiencias positivas de medición de
on
uso de
positive
tiempo
experiences
y de
measuring
trabajo
time
de
use and care
cuidados
work
desagregado
with
por
data
sexo.
disaggregated by sex,
Consistirá en 8 minutos
we
para
will
cada una de
have
las
8 minutes
panelistas,
for each of
en
our
la cual se
panelists
referirán a temas
who will
específicos
be
según la
talking about
experiencia
specific
país en la medición
topics
del
according
uso
to their
del
country
tiempo.
experience in
Para dar
time
inicio
use
propiamente
and
a
in measuring time
este
use.
segmento del
To
panel,
begin,
le daríamos la palabra o
I
vamos a
will give
iniciar
the
con la
floor
señora Diana Osorio, quien es
to
asesora y
Diana
coordinadora
Osorio,
del grupo de
advisor and
enfoque
coordinator
diferencial e
of the
interseccional
Differentiated
EDI
Approach
del
Group,
Departamento
EDI,
Administrativo
of
Nacional de
the
Estadística,
Administrative
el
Department
DANE,
of
de
Statistics,
Colombia.
DANE, in
Doña Diana
Colombia.
nos acompaña por vía virtual, entonces
She
no sé
is
si
joining
ya
us
contamos con ella,
virtually,
creo
so
que
just
sí.
to be sure that we have her,
Para que la pongamos acá en
let's go
pantalla.
ahead and project
Y
her on
doña
screen.
Diana se
And
referirá
Diana
a
will
la
be talking
importancia de las
about
encuestas del
the
uso del
importance
tiempo y
of time use
la cuenta
surveys
satélite para la
and satellite
cuantificación de los
accounts
cuidados
to
en los entornos
quantify
rurales.
care
Un
in
gusto
rural
contar
settings.
con la señora
It's a
Osorio
pleasure
y
to
le
have you,
damos la
Ms.
palabra.
Osorio. You have the floor.
Hola, ¿me escuchan bien?
Sí, gracias.
Listo, entonces, ¿están viendo mi pantalla?
Can you see my screen?
Sí, se ve perfectamente.
Yes.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias. Creo que me veo un poquito extraña en la imagen, pero
I
bueno,
think there's something strange on my
rápidamente sé que
camera,
tenemos
but
muy poco tiempo, pero primero
I know
agradecerle la invitación
we don't have
grande,
much
les
time.
riguroso.
Thank you,
¿Me
everyone.
escuchan?
Sí, perdón, nada más si la puedes poner en
Just
modo
if you could have it on
presentación, porque se ve
presentation
Ya
view.
está en modo presentación.
Um, no se nos ve porque se ve todavía con
We
las
are seeing
diapositivas al
the
lado
small
izquierdo.
slides to the left.
No sé si abajo fue.
¿Sigue igual?
Sí,
Mm, espérate, yo vuelvo a empezar acá porque es
con
que si no
doble
esto se
pantalla.
bloquea.
Tal vez si es con doble pantalla, eso es lo que está
It
pasando.
might be the case that you have two
No,
screens.
déjame, yo vuelvo a intentarlo a ver porque no
Let me
sé.
see.
Aquí esperamos, no se preocupe.
Sí, qué pena. Ahora ya no sale esto. No le encuentro.
Sí, no, las pueden compartir y acá del equipo también. Bueno, ya
You
ahí
can
está
also
cargando,
share it
pero carga
and
otra vez como en
¿Sigue
modo
igual?
Sí, está en modo
Ah,
edición.
entonces le voy a pedir el apoyo a mi colega Andrea Pereira para que
so maybe Andrea
las
Pereira can help me with that.
Okay,
me
voy a
las
ver.
pueda enviar y mientras yo voy adelantando aquí y
And
doy
I'll
la
just go ahead
introducción, si
and
les parece.
start with the
De acuerdo, sí,
introduction.
vamos a habilitar a Andrea Pereira entonces para que pueda
Okay.
tener el compartir. Adelante, doña
Go
Diana.
ahead.
Entonces denme un minuto y ya se
Just
la...
a second.
Y tal vez intentándolo como PDF también podría ser una.
Maybe if you try to show it as a PDF.
Me informan por acá que Andrea ya está habilitada para que pueda compartir.
Andrea can now share her screen.
Diana, si quiere para
So,
que puedan enviarla con
Listo.
calma. Ya,
Ya,
ok.
Andrea la tiene. Mil disculpas.
yeah,
Creo que
Andrea
sabes algo
has
que
it. I'm sorry.
siempre.
Sí, 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 siempre.
Bueno, entonces voy a ir hablando mientras,
Okay, so
digamos,
I'll
llega
start speaking while you
un poco la.
project
Primero, pues
the
agradecerles por
presentation
la
later. First of all,
invitación y
of
la
course, thank you for
participación al
inviting me to
foro de parte,
participate
pues, digamos, de la directora general, la subdirectora, quien
on behalf of
desafortunadamente
the deputy
no pudo
director who was
asistir el
unable
día de
to
hoy.
join us today.
Pues muchísimas gracias
She
por la
sends her
invitación.
greetings and
Quisiera
is
también
appreciative of
unirme un poco
the
al
invitation.
reconocimiento
I
que
also would like to
mencionaba,
echo
digamos,
the
la
words
moderadora
in
anterior
recognizing the
sobre
previous
estas
uh,
discusiones y por qué son tan
panel by the
necesarias,
moderator
especialmente en
as
el
to how
contexto
important these
de los
discussions
temas de
are
ruralidad.
in the context of
Entonces,
rural settings.
específicamente para el DANE, la pregunta estaba
Specifically
orientada
for the
sobre
Department of
cuáles
Statistics in
son
Colombia, the
precisamente la
question
importancia de las
was
encuestas
the
del uso
importance
del tiempo y la
of
cuenta
time use
satélite de la
surveys
economía del
and the
cuidado.
satellite
Y
account
aquí quiero
of the
partir
economy of care.
precisamente de las
And here
palabras
I would
de
like
mi
to echo
antecesora
the words
Irene, que
of
precisamente ya
Irene,
ella
who
dio
went
luces
before
sobre
me.
lo que
She
se
already
tiene en
gave
la
some
presentación
information
para el
as to
caso de
what we have
Colombia
in Colombia.
y por lo tanto creo que pues
Therefore,
ya un poco dio un poco acerca de los insights que
we've
tenía
already heard some
lo
of the
que da la encuesta
insights
nacional del uso del tiempo,
of
incluso
our
las
time use
diferencias en
survey
cargas de trabajo de
and the
cuidado no
differences
remunerado
in
y
unpaid
mencionó también
workload
un instrumento
and
que para nosotros es fundamental
a
como el tema
fundamental
de la
instrument
ley
for us,
1413
which is Law
2010.
1413 passed in
Entonces,
2010.
así, en ese sentido, quisiera enfocarme un poco
With
al
that,
principio
I'd like to
sobre la encuesta
focus
nacional
on
del uso del tiempo.
our
Nace
national
precisamente,
time
como
use
bien lo
survey.
mencionaba
It
Irene,
started,
donde
as
las
Irene
organizaciones de
said,
sociedad civil y todas
with
estas
civil
mesas de
society
trabajo
organizations and
intersectoriales
working groups
hicieron, digamos, toda
coming
este tipo de
together
negociaciones y pusieron sobre
and
la agenda de política
negotiating
pública
to bring this
esta creación
to
de este
the
instrumento desde el
public
año
policy
2010.
agenda.
Por lo tanto, esta
This was
encuesta en
in
Colombia
2010,
busca
and so
generar
this
información
survey
sobre el
in
tiempo
Colombia
dedicado
wants to
por la
provide
población de 10
information
años y
on
más, actividades de trabajo
the population 10 years
remunerado
and
y no
older in
remunerado.
terms of paid
Ahí ya
and
creo que está en
unpaid
la
work. I think
presentación.
you can see the presentation now
Tiene
on
dos
screen.
objetivos específicos:
There's
insumos
two
para la
specific
medición de la
objectives.
economía del cuidado a través de la cuenta
One is
satélite
to
y
work as
producir
input to
información
measure
base
the
para la construcción de
satellite
indicadores
account
que
and to produce
permitan la
information
formulación,
for indicators
seguimiento y evaluación de
that can
políticas
help
públicas. La
follow
encuesta
up and
nacional del
evaluate
uso
public
del tiempo
policies.
es importante
The
también
National Time Use
para
Survey
conocimiento de las personas que
is
atienden el
important
foro. Va,
uh,
digamos, en
for
este
those
momento
in the forum to
actualmente
understand
está
that is
en trabajo de campo
it is
para
currently
su
being
cuarta
done. It's
edición. ¿Sí?
now on its
Digamos,
fourth
Colombia es uno de
edition,
los
field
países
work.
referentes en
Colombia is one
América y
of the reference
Latinoamérica en el
countries in
número de
Latin
versiones que
America
tiene la
in terms
encuesta
of how
nacional del
many
uso del
times
tiempo,
we've done the
y la
time
ley
use survey.
1413 establece que se
And
debe
our
hacer esta
law
medición cada
1413
3 años.
establishes a
En promedio,
measurement
digamos, las
every 3
recomendaciones están entre
years
3 y
on
5
average,
años.
between
Colombia
3
pues la
to
tiene
5 years.
actualmente
Colombia
cada
has it
3.
currently every
Producto
3
de
years.
eso, digamos, la
As a
encuesta nacional
result
del
of
uso del
that,
tiempo
the
es un instrumento
National
para la
Survey
cuenta
of Time
satélite de
Use
la
is an
economía del
input
cuidado, y
for
aquí donde la
the
ley
satellite
es una
account of
herramienta fundamental
economy
porque
of
la
care. It is a
precisamente
vital
la ley
tool
establece
because
que
the law
se debe
establishes
trabajar en pro de
that we have
incluir
to
el
work in
sector
order
de
to
cuidado en las
include
cuentas
the care
nacionales,
sector
¿sí?
into the national
Como, digamos,
accounts.
como alternativa a esa
As
medición se
an
puede
option
aplicar la
to
política
this
satélite,
measurement, we have
que
the
busca
satellite
incluir
account,
inclusión del trabajo
whose
de cuidado no
the aim is to
remunerado
include
en
the
un marco
unpaid
extendido para el
work
sistema de
on an
cuentas
extended
nacionales, y
framework
tiene
for
como
the national
objetivo
account systems.
precisamente
And the
valorar
objective is to
económicamente ese
value
trabajo de cuidado
economically
no remunerado por
this
la población que se
unpaid
realiza por la población de menores de
care
10 años y
activity
más,
uh,
determinado o
care,
clasificado por sexo de
performed by
acuerdo
the
con
Colombian
números
population of 10 years and more
funcionalidades,
in a
perdón, de
given
la
year
cuenta.
by sex and
Permite comparar
according
el
to
valor
the
de ese trabajo
functionalities
de
of the
cuidado no
account.
remunerado con
It
otros agregados
also
macroeconómicos y
allows to
generar
compare
indicadores
this
económicos.
value
Entonces
of
creo
this
que esto
work with the
brevemente como para
macroeconomic
contexto,
national accounts aggregates.
y en ese orden de
And
ideas
in
voy
this order of ideas,
presentar algunos
we
resultados
can
clave que
show
creo que
some key results
finalmente seguramente
that
también se han mencionado previamente en
are
las
probably
antecesoras.
mentioned
Simplemente
before. But I believe that the key message and the importance of these tools is to be able to view these laws that are unbalanced between men and women, not only men and women, but also rural areas and urban areas, and also how in one way or another this affects the objective of this forum, the production chain and the agri-food chains. So in this slide, we can observe to the left how men, in comparison to women, have a higher participation in paid work. And in the case of unpaid work, women have a higher participation. This particular slide, and I believe this is an interesting result of the time use survey, is for a population that's objectively identified as farmers. I believe that it is in line with the target population of what we have been discussing this journey. And to the right, you can verify that the unpaid work, as mentioned by my predecessor, in this case, women have a difference of almost 5 hours and a little bit more. The unpaid work, 8 hours 32, in comparison to 3 hours and 30 minutes for the case of male. Next slide. In this case, we wanted to include the comparison that in the case of rurality is quite pertinent. I mean, those people that are responsible party for additional people, minus under 15 years old or seniors over 50. In the case of Colombia, it includes data and results about disabled people. So here we compare uh, and to the left, in the left panel, when we're analyzing the paid activities, men have a better participation in hours and minutes all over the day in comparison to women. And in the case of unpaid activities, women, even if they have or they do not have people to take care, between minor 50 years old and over 50 years old, have a higher participation in unpaid activities. Here, this is in line with the purpose of the forum, which is to make the difference, to show the difference about the rural areas and populated areas. Here you can see how the participation in unpaid activities, women have some 93%. There's 93% in comparison to 56% of men. So the gap remains. We still show that the pattern, regardless if it is rurality and the urban part and different types of activities, women is the one that has a higher care burden. And here, to show the comparison between municipal cities and the people that are disseminated and the paid and unpaid work. Here we can see 8.33 in comparison to the 3 hours of men, even in personal activities, which are relatively similar, but saying that women sometimes displace the self-care and personal activities for care activities or indirect care activities, which is to take care of other activities at home, or in this case, within the productive units that affect this dedication time. This final slide is about the activities where we are spending time. This is measured in millions of hours of domestic work and unpaid work. Here we can see as the previous slide. Here we can observe in the horizontal axis that the number of hours is focusing two major activities related to food supply and cleanliness and maintenance and repair at home. After that, we have the care and parental support, and finally, clothes or clothing. This is for rural areas. So what is the number of million of hours we have accumulated in this measurement? This is a measurement carried out during 52 weeks to have an approximation and to illustrate what happens from this tool, this instrument,
digamos, de esta, ya desagregado por el tipo de actividad.
disaggregated by
Aquí
activity.
quisiera mencionar,
So
pues,
here I would like to
La
mention
primera
several
de
things.
ellas, que
The
creo
first
que
one of them is
cómo
precisely
tipo de
how
instrumentos
this
tienen
type of
ustedes también que
instruments and
acercarse cada
measurements
vez,
led
cada
us
vez más a las
to
necesidades de información
approach
que
more and more to the
ya lo
needs
habrán
of
explicado aquí,
information.
porque
I
hay unas
assume this has
necesidades
been explained
sentidas
already.
sobre
There
cómo
are
estas se han
some needs
manejado en la
about
ruralidad
how
y es ahí
the care is
precisamente donde la encuesta nacional
conducted in rurality.
de esta
This is
cuarta
where the
edición
Time Use National
incorporó
Survey in this fourth edition
todo, un poco
included
ajustó su cuestionario, ajustó
or
el
adapted
instrumento
the
para poder
questionnaire,
incorporar
the
más
instrument, in order to
actividades que se
include
relacionen más
more
con lo que tiene que ver con
activities
el
and to
cuidado
get closer
comunitario
to
y
the
el cuidado
community
rural.
care and the
Esto en
rural care.
línea, que creo que pues ya
This
también
in
seguro lo han
line
escuchado, con lo que se
with
incorporó en la hoja de
the
política pública, que
inclusion
es el
in the public
COMPES,
policy,
de
the
creación del
compass
Sistema Nacional de
of
Cuidado,
creation of
que
the
pues
national care
establece algunas
system
necesidades de
that
información
establishes some needs of
adicionales
information,
y
some
que son necesarias
additional needs of
incorporarlas.
information needed
Esta
to
versión
include.
también de la NUD
This version of LENU, the
2024,
25th,
también se busca
25
hacer una
aims
ampliación un poco de la
to make
cobertura. Las
an
encuestas tienen unas
expansion of the
limitaciones,
coverage.
justamente lo que
Service
decíamos
have
en
some
términos de
limitations, not
recursos,
only limitations
porque
in
es la
terms of
encuesta nacional de
resources,
nuestro tiempo en
because it is
general
the
para
national
cualquier
time
país.
use
Es una
survey
encuesta que es
for
costosa,
any country.
pero
It is
también en
a
el caso colombiano en
costly
particular también
survey. In the case of
estamos
Colombia,
sujetos en el
we
tema de la
face
ruralidad y
challenges in
poder llegar
relation to
hacia las zonas
rurality
del
and to be
país.
able to
Sin
reach
embargo, en
some
esta
areas
nueva
of the
edición
country.
buscamos
However, in
ampliar esa
this new
cobertura
edition, we
geográfica
try to
para
expand the
poder
geographic
incluir
coverage to
segmentos
be able
ya
to include
asignados un poco
segments,
más
uh,
de muestra, por decirlo de alguna manera, para
sample
regiones como la Orinoquía y la
areas
Amazonía,
for
que es,
regions such as
digamos, una de
Amazonia
las
and
zonas que
Orinoquia.
también la encuesta
So
sigue
the
teniendo
regions
este
where
requerimiento de
the survey
cobertura.
has
Entonces creo que
this
eso es importante
challenge to have it
resaltarlo y
pending. So it's
también
important to highlight this.
creo que pues
And I
alinea
also
un poco con lo
believe
que las
that it is in
necesidades de
line with
información.
the needs of
Em,
information.
Siguiente diapositiva, porfa.
Next slide, please.
Esto ya lo mencioné. Siguiente.
I mentioned this already.
Y siguiente, porfa. Entonces,
And next.
creo que esta
I
diapositiva pues
believe
es
that
bastante
this
reciente.
slide
Quisiera señalar de nuevo,
is
Irene, porque creo
important.
que
I would
Irene
like
pues ya me dio
to
un poco
mention it again because I believe she
digamos que
gave
ayudó un poco
me,
también a ilustrar lo que
she
tenemos para el
helped to
caso
illustrate what
colombiano.
we have for the
Son pocos
Colombian
los
case.
países que tienen
There
lo
are
que
just
medimos.
a
Colombia
few
somos los
countries,
únicos
I
que han
believe
sacado la
Mexico and
cuenta sobre
Colombia are the only
economía
ones
del
that have
cuidado
had
y
this economy of
esta
care satellite
diapositiva
account.
precisamente qué
This
pasaría si
slide
nosotros
indicates
medimos
what
ese
will
valor
happen if we add
precisamente
this value.
ponemos un salario a las
If we
personas que
put a
son cuidadoras
salary
y lo
to
incluimos
the
dentro de los
caregivers
sectores
and
de
we
la
include
economía y
this
le
within
damos
the
ese
sectors
valor.
of economy
Si nosotros
and we give
valoráramos
this
el
value,
trabajo
if we
no
value
remunerado,
the
esto sería
unpaid
su
work value,
contribución, incluso
that
el valor
will be
económico
their
estaría por
contribution. The
encima de otros
economic
sectores
value will be
tradicionales de la
over other
economía, como se
traditional
puede ver en la
sectors of
gráfica general
economy,
del
as you
izquierdo,
can see
por
to the
ejemplo,
left
como
of
el
the graph.
comercio,
For
incluso
example, in
administración gubernamental y
the trade,
manufacturas. Y en el panel
public
derecho lo que podemos
administration, and to
observar,
the
que creo
right, what
que
we
es
can
va un
see,
poco en línea
I
con lo
believe
que
it
estábamos
is
mencionando,
in
es que
line
esa
with what
carga y
we
ese
are
trabajo de
discussing,
cuidado
is
no
that this
remunerado al final
burning
está
and this unpaid
siendo
work
proporcionado precisamente
is
por
being
la mayoría
provided
de
by
las mujeres,
most
pues no, creo que en
women,
una gran proporción en las
or
mujeres.
in
Esta
a
es la
large
edición para el 2021.
ratio of
Para el caso
women. This is for
colombiano, nosotros
2021.
también
In
hicimos
the
esa
case of
estimación
Colombia, we
en la
also
siguiente
made this
diapositiva
estimate. And the
para
next
también
slide,
para la desagregación de cabeceras
for
municipales y
the
centros populares,
disaggregation of
poblados,
the
perdón, y rural disperso.
populary
Entonces,
centers
en la
and rural
gráfica
centers.
podemos
In
observar
this graph, we
en
can
la
see
barra del centro
and
precisamente
then
donde
the
el
middle
total de
bar,
trabajo de cuidado no
the
remunerado
total of
medido en
unpaid
54
care
mil
task measured
millones
in
de pesos están
54,000
en
million
un gran
pesos.
porcentaje
It is in a
provisto
large
por mujeres,
percentage
que es la
provided
barra
by
gris, que
women,
está
which is
aproximadamente
the
en
gray
41 mil
bar
millones.
or the gray
Entonces,
column.
esto creo que es este
Uh,
tipo de
this
desagregaciones
type
y
of
insumos adicionales
disaggregation
que
and
proveen
additional inputs
precisamente
provide
datos e información para los
data and
tomadores de
information
decisiones y
for
poder
decision
saber
makers and to be
específicamente
able
cómo
to
está en
specifically
comparación
know
la ruralidad
how
con la
this
parte
is
urbana.
rurality compared
Y
to the
por
urban
último,
aspect.
quisiera
And
resaltar que en
finally, I would like
esta
to highlight
diapositiva,
that in this
hablando para las zonas
slide,
rurales,
for the
precisamente
rural
estas
areas,
actividades, y
the
creo que ya lo veíamos en una
activities
diapositiva
and And we saw it in our previous slide. the contribution is concentrated in economic terms, in money terms, it is concentrated in food supply and cleanliness, maintenance and repair for the place. So this slide that we see in million of hours is translated in terms of pesos. And this is telling us or showing us the contribution for rural areas of this activity, which is supply and cleanliness. So the topic is more, this is more concentrated in women. I will quickly close my presentation here. Please, last slide.
No, la siguiente, porque creo que esto ya lo mencioné. Quiero por último mencionar y dar
And
un par de
finally, I would like to
conclusiones
mention and make a couple of conclusions about the initiatives that are in line in order to supply this need of information. Another source of information a little bit underestimated because the National Survey of Time Use is just one ideal instrument to measure the unpaid care. But the importance of this type of instruments is that they are used not only by decision makers, but also by civil society organizations. The academia does not focus in specialized niches. So I would like to give some importance to the integrated houses survey. It has more coverage or more frequent, and I believe that it provides additional input for those people that would like to check their care model without having to wait 3 years to see the result of the National Survey on Time Use. This includes a specific chapter called Other Forms of Work that led us to measure the use of time dedicated to paid and unpaid care activity. So with us, we can also see additional aspects that are pertinent in the case of the rurality. Not only how much they are dedicated, but who are these women, how they are in terms of the school level, in labor terms, and other variables of interest. So I would like to highlight this a little bit. And in closing, I want to say that DANE, as a rural entity of the statistical system, currently participates not only in implementing, studying the law in the National Survey of Time Use, but another series of other initiatives that are important to leave for consideration and for knowledge of people interested and other initiatives with the Ministry of Equality and Equity recently created. One of them is related to the registration of of caregivers. The other one is related to the map of care. Somebody mentioned before not only how much we are requiring of care, but in this will be transformed according to the aging of the Latin American population, but also to know what is the offer of care services that we currently have in the country. And to do so, we are working on a first version of the map in order to identify this offer for the citizens in general. We have the simulator of unpaid work. It is annually updated according to the minimum wage in force. And finally, I would like to mention that in the case of rural women, there are publications of the rural woman that is part, and we see this, it is established through a decree. So we annually have this publication. The aim is to continue making visible those aspects for rural women, among them land tenure, which is associated to care aspects. And I believe there are several scopes, not only care services, scholarity, labor market, female health, everything related to, so we have migrated to see how rural women are in this final version that is about to be published in relation to pensions and labor market, which is a very pertinent topic, particularly under the framework of reforms discussed in the country. My apologies because I took longer, but I hope this is going to be useful for you and why it is important to continue working in collecting and producing this information regularly. However, it is also important to highlight how it's not only done task. The articulated work with other governmental institutions to make visible and to promote the use of this information is still a challenge for statistical national offices. We need the use of data and that we move from having measurement. We know how the phenomena is in terms of care. We need specific policies to take not only to have not only the data but to migrate towards punctual facts in order to improve and reduce this unpaid care burdening or load. Thank you very much.
Muchísimas gracias a la señora Diana Osorio.
Thank you,
por
Mrs.
esta
Diana
exposición
Osorio,
tan
for this
interesante,
interesting
llena de tantos
intervention
datos, es muy
with
difícil
many data. It's
extenderse y cuando
difficult now
tenemos
to
tantísima
go over
información
the
que
time
mostrar,
when we
tantas
have
buenas
this
experiencias.
information to
Y
show and these good
resaltaría de la
experiences.
intervención de la
From
señora
the
Osorio
intervention
la
of Mrs. Osorio, I
importancia
highlight the
de, bueno,
importance,
además de cuantificar los
besides
cuidados y
quantifying
como
the
vemos
care,
que es una de las
and
principales contribuciones a la economía
this is one
nacional,
of the main
también la
contributions to the
importancia de
national economy,
adaptar
the
los
importance of
instrumentos
adapting
que ya
instruments
existen
that
para
already
hacer medición de
exist
cuidados, no solamente con
to
encuestas de
measure
cuidados,
cares, not
sino
only
también la
with the
importancia de
care
que desde
service, but also
nuestros
the importance
espacios
that
revisemos
from our
cómo
spaces we
poder
revise
ir
how we
transformando y
can
teniendo
transform,
indicadores y poder
including indicators,
contabilizar los
and
cuidados en las encuestas anuales que
to
se
count
hacen.
these
Me parece
results
eso
of
un
the
dato
annual
sumamente
service. This
interesante,
is a very
además del
interesting
poder
information besides
visibilizar la
making
interseccionalidad
visible
de las
the
mujeres, que no
intersectionality
es lo
of
mismo
women.
ser una
It
mujer
is not
rural
the
que
same
ser
to
una
be
mujer
a rural
urbana,
woman than an
así
urban woman.
podamos tener
Although
las
all of
mismas
us may
sufridas,
have,
tenemos brecha sobre
may experience the
diferentes en
same
algunos
gaps or different
espacios
gaps,
se
in
acrecientan
some
esas brechas
spaces
y
the
también
gaps
en función
are
de nuestras
bigger,
propias
also
características.
according to our own characteristics.
Además, pues el
Also,
importante dato sobre
the
los
important
servicios de
information
alimentos
about
y
the food
limpieza,
services and
que son
cleanliness,
a donde se
cleaning
concentran
services, where
muchísimas estas labores que
these
hagamos las
tasks
mujeres y por las cuales
performed by
no se nos
women are
contabiliza,
really
y si se nos
concentrated and
contabilizara en
they are
nuestros
not
países sería
accounted.
muchísimo más
So if
productivos y
that was
muchísimo
the
más
case,
ricos
we will
posiblemente.
be
Así que
more productive
le
and
agradecemos
richer.
muchísimo a la
So we
señora
really
Osorio
thank
por
Mrs.
esta
Osorio
excelente
for this
intervención.
great
Después les pasamos a
intervention.
los panelistas su
The
presentación.
presentation
Y
will be
ahora
given to the panelists later.
permitimos
And
escuchar la
now
intervención de la
let's
señora
listen to the
Aida Chávez
intervention of
Villalta, que se
Mrs.
encuentra
Aida
acá en la
Chavez
sala,
Villalta that is
quien es
here in
la
the room.
responsable de los
She is
sistemas
the
de
responsible
indicadores del
party of
Instituto
indicator
Nacional de
systems of the
Estadísticas y
National
Censos de Costa Rica.
Statistics and Census
Doña Aida
Institute
nos
of Costa
comentará
Rica.
sobre los
Aida will
beneficios de
comment about the
institucionalizar
benefits
las
of
encuestas de
institutionalizing
indicadores.
the time
Doña
use
Aida,
service.
la palabra es
Mrs. Aida, floor is yours.
Bueno, buenas tardes.
Good afternoon.
Bueno, primero que todo quiero
First of all, I want to thank the invitation made to the manager of the National Institute, Mrs. Floribel Mendez, and because of workload, she sent me the invitation to come here and to talk about this topic and to cooperate in everything needed in relation to the institutionalization of the time use survey. Let me tell you that the process, so I would like to start with information of the time use survey conducted here in Costa Rica. It has been a process, as in any country, a process that includes connection to authorities, politicians, and the society about the importance of being able to measure these workloads, unpaid tasks, and see the time men and women devote to these activities. In Costa Rica, for example, we initiated with a module that was included within the household survey carried out by INEC. At the beginning, it was difficult to convince the authorities of the Institute to realize the importance of measuring these statistics. But we succeeded with a working group that was created interinstitutionally with the participation of the Institute of Women, INEC, the academia through the National University, the Ministry of Labor, and the remote university. So they struggle for this model to be included within the survey, and INEC provided the funding to conduct the survey. That was in 2004. And for 2011, so all this year went by for us to have a broader coverage of the survey. So we made a survey in the metropolitan area. And in the metropolitan area, I mean, to value the workloads of these populations in rural areas is very little because almost the metropolitan area is an urban area. In 2015, we started the struggle to approve the law 9325 in the Congress for the institute within the work plan and the activities became the responsible party to conduct the survey and to fund the survey of time use. At that time, the law was not approved in 2015. It was not approved yet, but at that time, INEC did not have a funding to implement the survey. The first survey at the national level was made in 2017. So for 2017, we had some restrictions to implement the survey. So we have the last one conducted in 2022. In that case, INEC funded the survey. Challenges. When we carry out all this process, the biggest challenges, as in any country, is the financial aspect. But besides that, to give continuity to the information. So that was the aim with this law. In the law, so INEC gives the budget to conduct a survey, and every 3 years, and the central bank was granted the responsibility to host the data in order to have the satellite account, and the National Institute of Women is responsible party to provide the follow-up, the methodological and technical follow-up in relation to the processes that should take place step by step for the survey to have the expected results. In fact, all this part, so is to say, well, the financial part and continuity, but what other benefits have we had in relation to this? In past years, when we conducted this survey, we thought about the challenges we encounter, and we mainly found that was the financial part and the continuity, but also to have a sample, to be able to have a sample that will give me estimates, statistically reliable, robust from the statistic point of view. In that regard, there was this concern as well. And that gave us the right sample size. In 2017, when we conducted the survey, INAMO funded this survey, and they do not count with a robust funding to obtain all the estimators we want to get. So what happened at the end? From INEC, there were two scopes or two models about the size of the right sample. However, INAMO, with the budget, they didn't choose any of them, but they made a smaller sample. In some of the estimates, it was not possible to get information disaggregated by gender or by sex. So Donc, it was about to find, and the law allows us to have the right budget in order to obtain the estimators disaggregated by sex, which is something vital in the time use service. Another important topic that has helped us a lot in the process has been the use of technology. So now, for the time use survey, we have worked with tablets. So that simplified the collection task. So there is an approachment with the information system units, and special programs were created to go from the field, cleaning the information immediately. So through warnings, the tablet gives us, it warns me that something is weird, or it may even tell me that there is a mistake, for example. And the tablet, we include the classification use. So this fine-tunes the information obtained from the field and let the supervisors to make consultations within the tablets immediately. When the interview is over, the information goes to the office, and this starts increasing the size of the information files. And this information is pre-coded already. And besides that, it includes the criteria of review by this software included within the tablets.
Bueno, además de eso, bueno, les decía
Besides
sobre
that,
las clasificaciones. Nosotros
classifications.
trabajamos con
We work with
que utiliza
the classification Mexico uses, but it has been tropicalized. So now we have a higher funding, that we have funding will create a sort of specialization and the staff that takes care of the classification. So we can include within our classifier, already tropicalized, we can include some specific classifications that we did not have before, but through. So whenever the survey is conducted, we find new classifiers that let us to have a better classification of occupations. Besides that, because of the size of the sample, we can also obtain disaggregations that we did not have in the past. We can disaggregate, we can get estimates at the age group level, urban or rural regions, and other classifications that help for the better analysis of the information we are obtaining. Those are the advantages we have. We have been including within the time use survey through this law that lets INEC to fund the survey. Right now, the law is looking for an amendment because it says that every 3 years we need to develop the survey. However, every 3 years, it is a short time. We are just concluding one survey, and we need to start the task for the next one. So we are requesting the survey to make it every 5 years. However, there is this fear that the congressmen, or when they evaluate this paragraph of the law, will decide that it's better to derogate the law and to eliminate the survey. This is the concern of the Institute of Women. However, from INEC, we believe that this is not going to happen because last two surveys were conducted under this line.
That would be it on my part. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Aida, talking about the importance of institutionalizing time use surveys and also the importance of ensuring we have mechanisms to finance these surveys so that we can better collect data and that this can be sustained over time to help us make decisions and to give us or to allow us to have a look as to what is happening in terms of care in rural settings and the situation of women and how they are investing or spending their time and how we can improve indicators and have more information collected. For that, we need to ensure it is institutionalized. We heard from Colombia as well that it's important to have citizen support. That's also important to ensure these surveys can be maintained over time. To close the panel, we now have here in person Ms. Susana Perez Cadena from Mexico, representing the National Economic Statistics Institute, INEGI, and she is General Director of Economic Statistics. She will be talking about things to consider when developing indicators to measure care in rural settings. Before we give the floor to her, I would just like to say that we are missing some people here in the room. You can notice it clearly, and it's because they're at a press conference, because we want to provide greater visibility to what we're doing here, what is being discussed here, and to share the type of work we do. So just an apology. We do see some of the authorities not in our room, but it's because they are giving visibility, shedding light to the different contributions by institutions. And now, Ms. Susana.
Muchísimas gracias. Muchas gracias por la invitación. Muchas gracias al
Thank you
ICA.
so much for the invitation. Thank you to ICA for organizing this. Thank you to CAF for the support, of course. And in our Institute of Statistics at INEGI, we have so much to say, as everyone else has had. We'll try and keep to the time. It is truly a pleasure for me to be here and to know that, well, the topics I work with are not so close to what we see here, but as Marcela said, I'm the Director of Economic Statistics at our Statistics Institute. So I look to national accounts, monthly surveys, yearly surveys in businesses. I do the economic census, agricultural census, pricing, inflation, all that. Sometimes harsh topics, if you will. And they may seem not to be related to gender-based statistics or others. However, all these measurements we perform, like economic census and the different surveys, whether monthly or yearly, are very much related to the gender-based approach. Because these surveys, whether monthly, yearly, every 5 or 10 years, there's questions on female labor, male labor,
discapacidades, entre otros
matters
temas
related to disabilities and other intersectional topics.
Además de esto, pues también quiero mencionar que
Besides that, I have to say, I am a woman, so of course all these topics that we have heard about today touch us. They touch us very directly. In the literal sense, literally they touch us on our bodies. We feel them. We really understand them is what I mean. And then we also have to cover them in our work. So these are absolutely fundamental matters. And one of the things that I don't necessarily have to do at the Institute such as household surveys or socio and demographic surveys. Even if I'm not directly working in them, they are, of course, very interesting. I know about them, and I would like to refer to them to show what we are doing at our institute in Mexico. First is the National Time Use Survey. We can jump ahead to the next, I think. The National Time Use Survey is something we started in 1996. I don't know who is working the slides. There are many, but just go ahead and go through them because there are very many slides. So just skip over them. I will just focus on very few. Something I think is very interesting of our National Time Use Survey is that it started in 1996. So 1996, and now is when we're actually just preparing the 7th edition of our survey. So we can say that we have a large series, a long series of observations. Next year, we will have the 7th edition published. One of the things I find very interesting, and please keep moving forward with the slides. These are some of the results of our survey. We don't go into as much detail in terms of care, but even starting in 1996, it still had some level of addressing care. Here we see some of the results of the survey, the number of homes that provide care to one of their family members, and the number of people that perform the following activities. And then the ones that we all do, productive activities, care, community work, and it has care particularly. Now, after some time, of course, we now need much more information. There's a demand for more information by the Institute of Women, but many other organizations also, just because they want to move forward on care. As I said, this is the number of surveys that we've had. In the next slide, and here I do want to focus. It's very important for me to highlight how international organizations have helped us get organized as countries. They've helped us have these interesting discussions as to what is a productive activity, what is a non-productive activity. And unpaid work at home, I'm sure you all know, is considered a productive activity. So under productive activities, we have work for the market, labor, but also unpaid work at home. And this is recognized as such. It's just that it's not measured as we should as a productive activity in any case. And there's also the production of goods for exclusive use in the home, such as production of shoes, clothing, building your own home, etc. And then the non-productive or personal activities that are classified as to international recommendations are personal care, self-care, studies, exercising, sports, living together, hobbies, entertainment, playtime, pastimes. But for me, what's really important to highlight is the fact that unpaid work at home is already classed as a productive activity. And under productive activities, we have work for the market, unpaid work at home, and the production of assets that are exclusively used at home. And in unpaid work at home, there's a difference between work performed for assets for self-consumption at the home, and it includes unpaid domestic work for your own home, unpaid care work for members of the household. So care work is under this area, the purple area of the slide, and the purple area is under productive activities. So once again, it's a category of productive activities. So it's not measured enough, yes, but at least it is included as a productive activity. That's what I'd like to highlight of international work. that has been done for several years now. We can skip over this slide, I think. I'm sorry. Very quickly, unpaid work at home is almost 50% of work, of total work. Work for the market is almost the other 50%, but unpaid work at home is almost half of all the work we do. The percentage distribution of total time per work in a week is highlighted here. And as we've heard from several participants, it's not the same in rural areas and urban areas. To the left side of the slide, you see, on top. On top, you have cities with more than 10,000 inhabitants, and then underneath you have areas with less than 10,000. So unpaid work was purple, remember. In larger cities with over 10,000 people, it's 48.7% of the time spent per week in terms of work or total work. But smaller locations with less than 10,000 people, it's 2 percentage points more. And the production of assets for exclusive use at home is 6.4%. So if we add these two, actually, we would have 50.7 plus 6.4, it's 57%. Compared to 49% in urban areas. If you add 48.7 plus 1. So putting them both together, we see that in rural areas, the percentage of time spent on unpaid work is 8% larger than in cities.
Siguiente, por favor. Bueno, esa me la voy a brincar.
I will skip over this next one.
Sí, porque no me va a dar tiempo de todas.
I won't be able to cover everything. So.
Lo que quisiera resaltar es el segundo
For this one, I want to highlight the second line, unpaid work in care now, specifically care. The number of hours spent specifically on caring for a family member. And this is not passive work, like you're cooking and then you have your eyes open. It's the number of hours to care for family members or household members. Women spend 12.3 active hours per week and men only 5.4%. Sorry, 5.04 hours per week.
En esta lámina, lo que quisiera decir es lo que ya decía hace rato, que
as I said, we see that our initial time use survey, ENUT, started in 1996. It's on its 7th edition, but it doesn't really go into detail. So for care, so in 2022, we issued the National Survey for the care system. And it's for the care system because it is there to support the implementation of this system of care in our country. We've already heard about this system by the Undersecretary, or the Women's Secretary this morning, Citlali. And Gabi also works at the Women's Secretariat, so she knows. This survey was specifically created to address that matter of system of care in Mexico. And some of the results of this survey on care in ASIC. First, in Mexico, we have 31.7 million caregivers who are part of the household or come from other households, and almost half of these people, 45%, can receive care or is susceptible to receiving care. That includes children, of course. Thirdly, of the total population that could receive care, 64.5% did receive care, and 35% did not.
Ahora, la población cuidadora principal, los
And the
cuidadores
main
principales
caregivers,
son los que se dedican principalmente a la
so the
atención de
ones
una
that
persona, ¿no?
mostly
Entonces,
care for
aquí tenemos
others,
que 22.5 millones de personas son
22.5 million
cuidadoras
people
principales
are
e
main
integrantes del hogar.
caregivers
Nuestra
for
población en
household
México es de
members.
alrededor de
In Mexico,
130
we have
millones de
about
personas.
130 million people.
22.5
22.5 million of
son
them
cuidadoras
are
principales en el interior del
caregivers
hogar.
mainly in their
Y
home.
de ellas, el
And of them,
86.9 son
86.9
mujeres.
are women.
Bueno, no es novedad, ¿verdad? Ya lo vimos
Nothing
en
new.
todas
We've
las
seen that
presentaciones de
in previous
la mañana,
presentations and
pero
this
bueno, ahí está el
morning.
dato en el caso de
But there
México,
you
muy
have the
parecido a
figures
lo que
for
hemos visto de
Mexico,
otros países,
quite
¿no?
similar to what we
86.9.
see in
Bien,
other countries.
y nos saltamos la siguiente y la siguiente.
Let's step over a few of these.
Bueno, eso sería todo por parte en
So
lo
I
que
think that
toca
would be
a
it
la
as to
ENUT y la ENACIC,
these two
encuesta
surveys,
específica de
the
mujer. Por
time
aquí
use and the
tenemos
care
también datos
survey.
del
We also
censo
have some
agropecuario
additional
y
figures
del
from our
censo
agricultural
agropecuario,
census.
y tenemos aquí, si vemos el renglón de hasta
And if you
abajo,
look at the
cómo
line at the very
84%
bottom,
de
84% of
de la mano de obra en
labor
el campo son hombres
working in the
y
field
16%
are
son
men,
mujeres. Y ya no apunté
16%
aquí el
are
dato,
women.
pero
I
aquí
didn't
les
add
voy
the
a mencionar
information, but I'll just
algunos.
mention some others
Primero, del total de la
of
mano de obra
the total
permanente en el
permanent
campo, que son
labor
11 millones de
in
personas, 11.1
fields. So
millones de
that's
personas.
11.1 million people
De
working
los
permanently
hombres,
in
el
the countryside.
50%
Of
son
them,
no
50% of
remunerados,
men are
es decir, son
unpaid.
familiares no
So they're
remunerados
family
que participan en
members,
las
they have to pitch
actividades
in with
de la
their
unidad de
parents'
producción.
activities or the production
Pero de
unit's
las
activity.
mujeres,
And
no
of
son el
women,
50%
they're not
como los hombres,
50%
son el
as men, they are
70%.
70%.
El 70% de las mujeres
70% of
son
women
no remuneradas.
are not
En
getting
el caso de
paid.
los jornaleros,
As for farm
o sea, ya
workers,
ahora pasando ya no
um,
solamente al personal que trabaja
so that's not
permanentemente,
just
sino al
people
caso de los
permanently
jornaleros y
working
jornaleras,
at
el pago del
farms, but
jornal
part-time
por día
workers
en
at
el caso de
farms.
los hombres es de
For men,
228
they receive
pesos por día en promedio,
228
y en el
pesos
caso
per
de las
day on
mujeres es
average,
de
and women
201 pesos
201
por día.
pesos
No
per
es
day.
tanta la
It's
diferencia,
not
ya no es
an
tanta
abysmal
como antes,
difference. It's
pero
not as
sí
large as
hay
it used to
diferencia.
be, but there's still a
228
difference.
pesos por día
228
contra
pesos versus
201 pesos por día.
201
Ahora, ¿y
per day.
quiénes dirigen las
And
unidades de
who are
producción?
leading production
El
units?
81%
81%
de los unidades de
of
las unidades de producción está dirigida
farms and
por
productive units are led
hombres,
by
¿no?
men,
Y el otro
are run by
restante
men, and the
19%
19% left
por
are
mujeres.
run by
En
women.
la mañana veíamos la
This
presentación
morning we
de
saw a
la colega
presentation
de
um,
España, que
by
era
our colleague from
29.9%,
Spain,
y algunos datos
29.9%,
se han mencionado por ahí
and
por
we've
en
heard
nuestro
figures
caso,
from other
en
countries.
el
In our
creo que
case,
de Colombia decían que
I think
12%, algo
Colombia was
así, ¿no?
12%. In our case,
Pero
it's
bueno, en nuestro caso es 19%.
19%.
En fin, otro de los productos que
Another
son también
product
muy importantes y que mencionaba,
that's very
platicamos
important
hace rato con Gaby,
we mentioned with
que
Gabi,
es útil para la
which is
identificación de
useful to
cuidados,
identify
es
care,
un producto que llamamos el DENUE,
is
que es
a
el
product we
Directorio
call
Estadístico
DENUE.
Nacional
This
de
is a
Unidades Económicas. Es un
statistical
directorio de
directory
todos los
of economic
establecimientos y las
statistics
empresas
and
en
businesses,
México,
including
que
all
por cierto
businesses and
está
corporations in
en internet de
Mexico.
manera
It
gratuita
is
para todo el
available
mundo. Lo
freely on the
declaramos,
internet,
declaramos
and
sus
we
variables como información no
declare
confidencial, como lo
the
hicimos,
variables as
fue como un
non-confidential
atrevimiento
information. This is
muy
something
grande
we dared to
en aquel
do
entonces, fue en
back
2009,
then. It was
antes de la pandemia.
2009.
En 2009 declaramos las variables como no
We declared
confidenciales y
non-confidential variables,
eso nos dio la posibilidad de
and so that
publicar ese
allowed us to
directorio, de
publish
hacerlo
that
público,
directorate.
y está público, y es
So it's
producto más
a
consultado
public
en México, por
directory
cierto,
and the most
desde hace 10
consulted
años,
product in
como 13
Mexico
años.
for over 10
Y
years now.
entonces en ese directorio que está
And there
georreferenciado
we have
puntito por puntito,
georeference,
manzana por manzana,
block by
así con
block,
su número
dot by
exterior y
dot, with
todo, datos,
numbers,
etcétera,
figures.
están las casas de día, centros de cuidado
You
infantil,
have
guarderías,
childcare
asilos, hogares para
centers,
niños sin
daycare
hogar,
centers,
y algunas otras instituciones
centers
sin
for
fines de
children that
lucro.
have no
De manera
parents, and
que
other nonprofit organizations.
eso nos ha
And
permitido
this has
construir
helped
como
us
país algunos otros
build
elementos, mapas
other
de cuidados
elements and
que
maps
tienen
of care
ahora, que están siendo base ahora
that
para
are
las
now
políticas, las
serving as
nuevas
the
políticas
basis for
públicas
the new
sobre el sistema
public
de cuidados.
policies on our
El
system of
INEGI, para
care.
concluir, está
And
trabajando
to
entonces
close,
en
our
avanzar en la
institute is
generación de
working
información
towards
para las políticas
preparing
públicas
information
que
for
tienen
public
que ver con
policy
género y con
related
otros
to
temas
gender
interseccionales,
and other
como
intersectional
se
topics,
mencionaron hoy en la
as
mañana, o
mentioned this
como
morning
han mencionado a lo largo de la mayoría de las
in
presentaciones.
different presentations.
Y pues eso es básicamente lo que quería
So that
compartirles.
was it
Muchísimas
for
gracias.
me. Thank you.
Muchísimas gracias a doña Susana
Thank
por
you so
compartir
much,
la
Susana,
experiencia
for
en México,
sharing
que
your
vemos que tiene
experience at Mexico.
muchísimos
In
años de
Mexico,
estar midiendo
you've
lo
been
que es
measuring
el
this for
uso del
several
tiempo
years now, we see,
y son un ejemplo
and
en la región,
you're
¿verdad?
an
Para todos los
example
otros
for
países.
all the region and for all the
Y
rest
esto
of
que
the
nos
countries.
menciona de la
And also,
visibilización de
as you
las
said,
labores de cuidados como
to
parte de
give
lo
greater
productivo,
visibility
pero
to
el
care as a
registro de lo que
productive
esto realmente está
activity, but
significa.
that it's still under recorded.
Tiene un gran peso en lo que les
That
comentaba. También
is
las
also very
brechas que
important.
se
And the
ven y se
gaps
reflejan claramente
we
en los
clearly
sistemas
see in
agroproductivos, como los
agricultural
casos de las brechas
systems and productive
salariales, las
systems,
brechas en la
salary
dirección de las
gaps,
unidades productivas,
um,
las brechas
leadership
en
that is
cuanto
not falling
a
in
las horas
equal
que invierten
terms,
las
and the
mujeres y
number of
los hombres en los
hours
cuidados
spent by men and
en los
women
entornos
in
rurales.
care in
Tal
rural
vez
settings.
para ya cerrar
To
este panel,
close,
agradecerle a
thank
todas
you
por sus
to
aportes,
all of you
volver a
for your
colocar
contributions.
la realidad.
We
Creo
have
que
to
todas las
remember
aquí presentes y los aquí
our
presentes conocemos
reality.
y
Everyone
trabajamos
here,
por
I know,
combatir, que es la recarga
wants to
de las
fight this
labores de
and
cuidados
fight
y
against
del
it, which is
trabajo no
overburdening
remunerado
and
en
the
las
overload
mujeres
of
y la
unpaid work
necesidad
on women,
de hacer
and the
un
need
cambio
to make
sustantivo y un cambio
substantial
estructural
changes,
en la
structural changes,
visibilización,
by
pues
providing
en la
visibility
recarga más bien que se da
to
a los
this
cuidados hacia las
and to
mujeres,
ensure women are
la
not
importancia de
overloaded
los
with
datos
care,
para
the
las
importance
tomas de
of data and
decisiones en
figures for
todos los
decision making
sistemas y en todo
in
lo
all
productivo y
systems,
la necesidad de hacer
and the
alianzas, que
need
también
to
varias de las
uh,
compañeras lo mencionaron, tanto para la
establish
generación de las
partnerships,
encuestas de uso del
alliances
tiempo como
for
para
time
las
use
encuestas de
surveys
cuidados
or for
propiamente,
care
y para
surveys,
poder generar políticas
and to
públicas
really
que
have public
realmente hagan
policies
posible esa
that can
transformación hacia
ensure we
sistemas de
have this
cuidados mucho
transformation
más
towards
equitativos.
equitable
Agradecerles a
systems
todas
of care.
y con esto
Thank you, everyone.
estaríamos
With this,
concluyendo este
we
panel y
close
si no
our
me
panel.
equivoco,
If I'm
vamos a
not
salir a
mistaken,
refrigerio
we will go for some
mientras para
refreshments,
tomarnos un cafecito,
have some
despertarnos, estirarnos
coffee,
un
stretch
poquito y después
around,
volvemos
and
porque
come
todavía
back
nos quedan
because we still
otras
have
dos sesiones
2
muy
more
interesantes, tres
sessions,
sesiones más
3
interesantes
more sessions.
para esta tarde. Tenemos más o menos 10
So we
minutos
have
de
10
refrigerio
minutes,
para ver si
10
recuperamos un
minutes
poquito
so
el
that
tiempo.
we can make
Muchas
up for some
gracias.
time. Thank you.
Patricia Cosani, ¿nos escuchas?
Sí, les escucho. ¿Ustedes me escuchan a mí?
Sí, perfectamente. Vamos a dar inicio ya con el panel en unos 5 minutos, ¿de acuerdo?
Perfecto.
Muchas gracias.
¿Puedo compartir pantalla? Porque no me sale la
Can I go ahead
opción.
and share my screen? I don't have the option to do so yet, please.
Perdón, ¿puedes repetir?
If
Sí
I
puedo
can have
compartir
the option to
pantalla. Si
share
no,
my
no.
screen.
Ya la veo.
Sí,
Oh,
sí.
thank you.
Si quieres hacer la prueba, a ver si te funciona.
Yeah, go ahead and test it out if you want.
Perfecto, ahí se ve.
¿Se ve a pantalla completa?
Sí, se ve bien. Ahí ya se puedes dejar de compartir si quieres, Patricia.
Perfecto.
Bueno, muy buenas tardes a todas.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Nos toca la última sección
We now have
de la tarde.
the last session of the
Después de
afternoon.
este día que hemos
Hopefully,
charlado tanto
after
sobre estos
this
desafíos
day where we've been
que
discussing
tiene la
so many
cuantificación de
challenges on
cuidados,
quantifying
podamos estar
care,
muy alertas para esta última reflexión.
we can be very alert for our
Agradecer
last
ampliamente el
few
Instituto
debates.
Interamericano
I'd like to
de
thank the
Agricultura ICA
Inter-American
por la
Institute for
invitación al
Cooperation on
Ministerio
Agriculture,
de
ICA,
Agricultura en cabeza de la señora
with
Marta
the cooperation
Carvajal,
of our Ministry of Agriculture,
hacer
with Dr.
esta presentación. Mi
Carvajalino.
nombre es
I'm here
Claudia
to give you a
Moreno.
presentation. I
Yo
am
soy
Claudia Moreno,
actualmente la jefe
and
de
I am
Asuntos
currently
Internacionales
the
del
head of
Ministerio de
International
Agricultura y
Affairs
Desarrollo
of the
Rural de
Ministry of
Colombia
Agriculture and Rural Development
y
in Colombia.
tengo 25 años de
I have
experiencia en
25
temas de
years of
desarrollo
experience
económico
in
territorial
territorial economic
con
development,
énfasis en género,
with an
en la vida de
emphasis
las
on a
mujeres
gender-based
desarrolladoras.
approach
Así
in the
que me
life of
entusiasma
rural
mucho
women.
poder estar aquí.
So I'm very happy to
Este
be here.
panel va a ser un poco más reducido que
This is
los
a
otros
smaller
que nos
panel than the
antecedieron.
previous ones.
Tenemos una invitada que es
We
nuestra
have
colega
an invited
Patricia
guest,
Cosani,
Ms. Patricia
consultora
Cosani,
especializada en cuidados y
specialized
protección
consultant
social
on care
de
and
ONU
social
Mujeres.
protection by
Y nos
UN Women.
corresponde esta conversación
And we will
alrededor de
be
los
talking
avances y
about
desafíos en la
progress and
cuantificación de
challenges in
los
quantifying
cuidados
care
en
work
los sistemas
in
agroalimentarios,
agri-food systems,
estadísticas e
statistics,
indicadores.
and
Creo que después
indicators.
del panel anterior
After
tenemos
the
un
previous panel, that gives
bastante
us a
rico
good
de
foundation,
cómo
a
se ha
good
dado algunas
context
experiencias
to
en nuestros
see
países
some of
alrededor
the
de esto.
experiences in our countries.
Y Patricia nos ayudará a
Patricia will
profundizar
help
en
us
dos preguntas particularmente.
look
Una,
at two specific
¿qué
questions.
metodologías o
First,
herramientas
the
se han
methodologies or
implementado para
tools that have been
cuantificar los
implemented to
cuidados en los
quantify
entornos
care
rurales?
in rural
Y la
settings,
siguiente creo que nos abre pues la
and another
perspectiva de
one to
balance
open
de
a
este día
broad
de
perspective
trabajo.
and give us the balance of
¿Cuáles serán
today's
esos
work,
desafíos para
the
promover
challenges we
la
have
economía
to
de los
promote
cuidados en los
the
entornos
economy of
rurales de
care
las mujeres?
in rural settings
Entonces,
for
por
women.
eso te doy la
With
palabra,
that, I
Patricia.
give you the floor, Patricia. Thank you.
Muchas gracias a ti,
Thank you
muchas
so
gracias
much
a ICA por este espacio
to
de
you,
diálogo.
to
Decirles
ICA for
que estoy en
this time.
representación de ONU
I am
Mujeres,
here
tanto la directora
representing
regional
UN
como la
Women.
adjunta
The
no
regional
podían
director
participar en la
and the
instancia
deputy
de hoy.
director were
Y bueno,
unable
yo
to
tenía las
participate
intenciones
today.
de estar
I
presencialmente,
really wanted to
pero
be
también
there
tuve
in
dificultades
person,
de
but
último
I
momento y por lo
also
tanto
had last
hoy
minute
acá.
issues come up, so
Decirles que
I'm
he estado
connected.
escuchando
I've been following all day, though. I've heard all your dialogues and discussion, and it's truly a wonderful time for the rural agenda, and where we can continue talking about the challenges ahead of us, but we also have to acknowledge all the progress made. I really like the questions you've asked because they help us find a balance between those two. To see all the path we've already walked down and what is left to continue. Let me see if I can share my screen.
Vamos de nuevo. Bueno. Ahí se ve.
You see it there, right?
Así es.
Yes, we do.
Bien. ¿Se ve a pantalla
Wonderful.
completa?
Is it full screen?
No.
No.
¿Ahora?
Now we do. Yes.
Bien. Bueno, entonces,
Great.
como les decía,
So as I
agradecer
said,
nuevamente la
I want
invitación.
to thank you for
A
inviting
mí me
me.
tocó también participar en
I
el
also
foro anterior el año
participated in the
pasado y a
previous
partir de
forum
ahí
last
poder
year, and
elaborar en
I
conjunto
started
con las compañeras
working
de
already
ICA
with
algunas reflexiones, digamos,
colleagues
como
from
parte de la
ICA,
publicación que
some
se
of the
presentó hoy más
reflections included in the
temprano, y
publication
de alguna
presented
manera
this
traigo
morning.
esto de
And
seguir pensando juntas los
it
desafíos, ¿no? Yo creo
entails
que
to
tener el trabajo
continue
acumulado es
thinking
importante.
about
Hay unas cuestiones
challenges.
que me parece importante resaltar en
Something
esto de la
important to
visibilización de los
highlight
cuidados, ¿no?
to give visibility
Cuando
to
hablamos de la
care,
medición y de la cuantificación,
because when we
estamos
talk
hablando en
about
suma
measuring,
también de poner sobre
quantifying,
la mesa
we
qué es lo que
really
está
are talking
sucediendo
about
a la
saying what's
interna
happening,
con este
what is
tema, a la
happening
interna de los
internally
hogares
with
con este
this
tema.
topic
Y cuando
inside the
hablamos
homes,
específicamente
and
de lo que pasa en la ruralidad,
talking specifically about rural
también
areas.
estamos visibilizando,
In a
¿no? Hoy
way, we're
decían
also giving
esta idea de
visibility
que,
to
bueno,
this. We
no
heard
se es
this idea
consciente de
today
todo el
that
trabajo que
not
hay
everyone is aware
de
of
trabajo
how
no
much work
remunerado,
is
entonces
involved, how much
me parece
unpaid
interesante
work
traerlo. Obviamente
we
que hay una
do. So it's
historicidad
interesting to bring
que
this
ya
up.
la conocen,
Of
que viene del
course,
movimiento
there's
social y en
also
mujeres feministas.
the
Creo que
social
esto de
movement and
incorporar la
feminist
perspectiva
movement
interseccional
of
es uno de los
women.
desafíos que
It's
se
important to
planteó hoy a lo
incorporate the
largo del día.
intersectional
Es clave,
perspective.
digamos, para
It's a
poder
key
seguir avanzando en la
to
agenda. O
continue
sea, no es una
progressing with
cuestión
the
de un
agenda.
momento que el movimiento de
It's
mujeres y
not something that
feministas
happens
puso
at
el
a
tema en la
single point
agenda
in
y que ahora
time
se
that the
retira, sino
feminist
que por el
movement brought
contrario,
this to the
en
agenda and then they're
suceder
done.
del tiempo
Quite the contrary, over
acompañando
time,
el proceso.
they
También
support the
así los
process.
instrumentos de
The
derechos
same
humanos, los
goes
instrumentos
for human
internacionales.
rights
Si nosotros
instruments
miramos
and
la primera
international instruments. If we
declaración de
look
derechos
at the
humanos,
first
quizás
declaration
encontramos esto de la
of human
sostenibilidad de
rights,
la vida o
we
del
can
respeto a las
see
diferentes
sustaining
personas o de los
life and
diversos
respect to
objetivos.
different
Ya
people
cuando
or
miramos
target
la Convención de
populations.
Protección de las
When we look
Personas, de
at
las
the
personas
Convention to
mayores, aparece
protect
explícita también esta
human
idea de
rights
avanzar
for
en
the
sistemas de cuidados
elderly,
y
we
del
talk
cuidado como un
about
derecho humano.
systems of
Y ahí
care and care
hay
as a
resaltar
human
esta
right.
idea de que la Corte
And I'd
Interamericana
like
de
to highlight
Derechos
the idea that
Humanos
the Inter-American Court of
este
Human
año
Rights
realizó las audiencias
this year
públicas
had public
a través de
hearings
consulta del gobierno
um,
argentino
on
anterior,
the
donde se
advisory
planteó esta
opinion
idea
by the previous
difícil,
government of
de género, y ahí
Argentina
participaron un
on
montón de
the right to
organizaciones y
care.
movimientos
And
también
there was
llevando las
participation of
realidades
several
de las diferentes
movements and different
intersecciones
organizations, bringing all the
dentro de ellas
intersections,
lo que tiene que ver con la ruralidad.
including
La Conferencia Regional de
rurality.
la Mujer
The
es
Regional
un hito
Conference on
importante, ya lo
Women is
mencionaron
also
hoy,
an
y
important
me hace
milestone. It's
detenerme
been
aquí
mentioned today.
sin
I don't
tener
want to
claro
delve
de
deep
que
into
estos
this, but we do have to
esfuerzos
understand that all
importantes
these
del movimiento
synergies
social, entre los
with the social
internacionales
movement, international
que trabajan sobre los
organizations
derechos humanos
that
y
work on
también
human
con los
rights,
gobiernos, ¿no? Por
and
eso es
with
tan importante
governments.
esta
And that's why it's
instancia
so important
que estamos
to also
celebrando hoy,
have
donde de alguna
this
forma se
meeting
empiezan
today.
a suceder las
In a
sinergias
way,
y se
you
empieza
have
a generar
synergies
como
pile
una
up
hoja de
over
ruta,
one
¿no?
on
Que
top
los
of the
gobiernos
other. You
argentinos
have a
asumiendo la
roadmap
medida del trabajo
established,
y vienen
and
avanzando
governments
en esta
really
temática.
take this on
Es
to
importante
move forward.
también decir que el sistema de
Also
Naciones
importantly,
Unidas ha promovido el
the
cuidado como
United
derecho
Nations system
humano
has
y
promoted
este año
care
han
as a human
sucedido
right.
cuestiones
This
importantes
year,
como esto
we've
de,
seen important
bueno, el año
milestones,
pasado,
such
¿no? Que
as,
tenemos
and
el
even
Día
last
Internacional
year,
de los Cuidados
the
que se viene ahora
International Day of
próximamente.
Care that
La
will soon
Conferencia
be
Internacional de la OIT
held.
también tuvo el
The
tema cuidados
International
como
Conference of
central
the ILO also
y
had
ni que
care at the
hablar
center of its
este
work.
foro
And of course, this
permanente de
forum,
ministras y
the
viceministras y
Permanent Forum
altas
on
autoridades
Ministers,
funcionarias de
Deputy
las Américas,
Ministers, and High
donde
Officials of the
desde esta
Americas,
mirada del
where
sistema
it provides this
de la cultura
in-depth view into the agricultural system incorporated into care as a cross-cutting theme. The publication we see on screen, as I said, that includes an article where we're working on what it means to implement a system, a care system. Of course, quantification is important, visibilization is important, recognition is important, but we also have to ensure we can implement systems and public policies that can really solve the issue. That's why we always work on the basis of integrated care systems not being one policy, one service, one action in a territory, but it is a series of policies and measures that come together to organize care in a new manner in societies. And this institutional coordination is very important. It's necessary. All state institutions that are part of this have to incorporate this perspective of care. Of course, as we heard from this morning, that care is a new pillar for well-being, and that we all should aspire to a new organization, a social organization of care that may be more fair to women especially. But we need to have all initiatives, all public policies incorporating this pillar of care as a cross-cutting theme. That's why it's so important to have meetings such as the one today with the authorities, bringing together experiences from different countries. It's not the same as a few years ago. We work with an idea of components, that a system of care is not just developing services, but also having the right regulations, with building human resource capacity, with acknowledgement, and to promote cultural change. All these components have to progress jointly so that we can truly achieve the transformation of the social organization of care. How much have we progressed in the latest years? Several countries in Latin America have been passing laws on integrated care systems. Other countries have bills of law being discussed. Some are more active, such as in Brazil and Chile, that are very recent, and others that started years ago and are not currently being discussed, such as in Argentina or Peru. All these bills of law, or the laws that have already been passed, have the characteristic of including, as part of their objectives and directives, to modify the social organization of care. And that includes adding the pillar of information and knowledge as something important. And in turn, they're part of the principles and directives to include territorial equality as a key factor to develop systems of care. So care systems have to include all the population, all the territories with all their characteristics. So in a way, there's also decentralization happening through different institutions and different service proposals with several components. We see that this comes up. We have to consider different intersectionalities and varieties. There's also some countries that may not necessarily be discussing a bill of law or having a law, but have progressed so much as well. Today we've heard examples such as from Dominican Republic, where Santo Domingo Este moved forward, and in Asua also with pilot projects and local work. The same for Panama. Other countries are working, such as Brazil and Chile and Peru, on, sorry, not Peru, Brazil, Chile, and Colombia, on implementing the care policy, the public policy, and some, like Uruguay, already have the integrated care system. We also have progress in local policies of care. Here, I like to highlight the fact that if we think about progress of this policy, we're not, again, referring to one single service, but the idea, as we've heard today, by Ecuador, for example, that articulate a diversity of services, that coordinate and understand the diversity within their territories. One of the document on Glaxo and UN Women that works on rurality also refers to the fact that rural settings are so diverse. And we've seen that throughout the presentations today. So in that sense, progress in public policy has been so important. These examples that come from different territories, of course, have to be coordinated by national policies as well. And this many times means that you have two large categories. One I call progress in method, well, that is called progress in methodologies and diagnostic methodologies. I won't give all the details as to time use surveys. We've just heard about the examples from Colombia, Mexico, and Costa Rica, and the presentations were very clear. But there's also other matters besides the time use survey and the unpaid work contribution to the GDP, which is the social representations, surveys on social representations of care that can shed light on other ways to measure or quantify or even characterize the systems of care or what care means. What are social representations? Well, this is a survey that starts from understanding what people think of what it means to have good care or to provide good care. For example, in Uruguay, they are closing their second measurement now. Karina Batiani is the one that started with this survey. She recently commented in another event that although it is a minimal change from one survey to the next, there was a change. And the change is related to the fact that there's now a system of care and the role of the state is clear. People understand that that the state has a role to play in social organization of care. And that in itself is great progress because social representations, and we've talked about joint responsibilities and the importance of involving joint responsibilities in terms of gender, but socially as well. These surveys tell us where we can go in the dialogue that the state can establish with citizens regarding cultural transformations.
This first survey in the case of Uruguay detected differences between cities and urban places and smaller locations. Uruguay has quite a small characteristic. So I believe it is an instrument that, as in time use service, and made progress in these decades, they allow to generate standards, improvements, and so on. It will be interesting to progress with this type of service all over Latin America. Another thing is related to the identification of care gaps. All of us are clear that we need to progress in this public policy. So what is the implication of progressing in this public policy? It is related to the fact to agree about the type of services we need. We're not going to need the same services. We're not going to be able to develop the same services in a capital city and in a province or in a rural territory. So start adding flesh to this demand offer of care, and to understand what is the cover gap is another way to quantify the different needs that we have at this regard. Another progress is related to the instruments for the implementation of public policies. And here we have quantification and matters as well. First, the calculation of cost in expanding impacts and the calculation of the economic impact. We can have direct and indirect impact calculations. So we need to consider that expanding the coverage of care services is not just an expense, it's an investment. There are economic returns generated from this intention. So start quantifying all these things is one of the important elements and one of the important progresses that have occurred in the, recently. So now we are trying to modify the language, meaning that all of us are interdependent, and while we have our bigger, smaller care, by this I refer to assistance, support, attention, depending on the diversity of the population, the age, the type of service, and the place where the person is located. So these variables are important because the conception of care as a human right leads us to universality and progressivity. We need to improvise for the state to develop public policies. We need to organize an order in the road. And the better thing for the state is to organize an order with criterion, with a clear criterion. And the care requirements are an example of criterion to organize this order. Another interesting instrument is related to maps of care that geo-reference services in order to generate some other strategies that I will comment as challenge proposals. And I believe it is also an important instrument to develop in the region, and particularly to include in the territories. Because very often the situation with this type of services that they need to make visible or to visualize all the matters. Finally, we have everything related to standards and indicators for the quality evaluation of the services. Important to include the gender perspective in these indicators, and of course the perspective of the territories, and finally everything related to the care action plans. Here we manage two big tools, the national plans or federal plans and local plans. Last year I commented that these local plans led to set participatory diagnosis with citizens and people, and in reality with the different territories on how to start the work in order to quantify the social organization of care. What are the challenges in my view? What are the matters that we need to take into account to develop the economy of care in rural environment? The exercise that we see in the publication that was presented this morning, I downloaded, I know you have it already. The exercise in article of UN Women is related to the fact of working with the components I show at the beginning that include most of the care aspects. The different countries make their own decisions with regard to the components. But basically, there are these five, and from these five, there may be more or less. And to develop specific strategies for each one of them. Let me quickly revise this four, and I will deepen a little bit more in information and knowledge, which is specifically the topic of this panel. In relation to coverage expansion strategies and to create services of quality, because one of the things that happens in relation to territorial inequalities is that the quality of the services are not the same in one place or another one. So I prefer to mention quality services. Concrete proposals to cover the needs in rural environments. One is the contact, the close contact with other centers to think about. So that is why the care map is important. What are the closest urban centers where there may be other human resources or technicians? Sometimes the necessary professionals do not arrive to many rural areas. So the idea is to use these contacts when they are required, maybe transfers, use of technology, the transportation need to be assured, identification of infrastructure available for community services. In the case of Uruguay, there were community care houses in small locations where there was infrastructure of common use, and from there services were generated. In relation to training, so we said that the proposals come in order to assure the transfer of people willing to be trained, and the key element is related to the care of people that can become paid caregivers. So to assure the care, where it applies for care. So if we're going to train somebody, the care has to be assured. The other one is the proposal of buses with mobile classrooms. The example of Guayaquil and Colombia, they stated this for training, to train women. So the training may have some mobile units in order to improve the development of this training, the use of technologies and the exceptions to start working. This is a tool that we use in the case of Uruguay from my previous life. And one of the things we did was to generate exceptions. People need to be trained as a requirement to start working in the program of personal assistance. The exception said that if in the territory there were no people trained, they could start working and be prioritized to for training purposes. I believe this is an interesting tool to use in rural environments. In relation to the quality of regulation services, there are several things. We have the quality of the services, the regulation of the labor market, rural labor market with co-responsibility, because very often there is sort of a regard from men, from the productive work, and the non-reproductive work of women becomes invisible, as well as, both the reproductive and non-reproductive work conducted by women. In relation to
Perdón, a la conferencia de la OIT, pero no de este año,
the ILO conference from the previous year, a call to pay attention to the promotion and realization of rights in work of the rural economies. Here we need to have a double look in attention in order to achieving all these initiatives that we can propose. The idea is to assure the other rights, to guarantee the other rights. For example, the right to work. The case of cultural change, I mentioned the rare social representation service. Today, we said that there are matter of violence, the conservative look and the sexual division of work. I believe the consequence of all this is specific campaigns. We used to say that it is not just vague awareness campaigns, but also the work from the territories. I believe the examples mentioned today by the colleagues from the social movement are very important because they generate the cultural transformation. I believe that one of the biggest challenges for the economy of care, but with a head on quantification, I believe it is important that this component, which is to promote information and knowledge of care, has a look in the rural environment. I introduced several elements. The conceptual matters on one hand, that is why the mechanisms of local participation groups are important or interesting. Everything related to the study of social representations or delegations, the relationship between care and the economic participation that was mentioned this day, and the implication of the steps on the agri-food system and how women develop the different tasks. The use of time in rurality, we learn about some progress and challenges today. The regularity and the time use, considering what the colleagues mentioned in relation to the process, is very important. And also to be able to disaggregate data. So we have a big challenge there. And the other thing is to understand what are the dimensions of the different populations requiring attention. Today we talked about ordinary people, disabled people, boys and girls and adolescents and senior people requiring care. I believe there is a universe to start zooming and to start understanding in those rural environments what are each one of these things that occur in the different populations, target populations. There's no homogeneity in that regard. We need to take care to be clear about that. And also something related to the revision of public policy practices. It is difficult for us to see the progress, but we have progress. We need to learn about them, to listen to the experiences is always something good. So in conclusion, I believe important to include rurality in any gender statistics. We have a challenge to progress in that sense, but also to include everything related to gender and care perspectives into the different statistics of agri-food systems. This is not my expertise to be on that side, but to understand that both things need to occur. So when we see the agri-food system and the phases from production to residues, waste, what happens with the care and with gender is key to move forward in this component. Finally, We repeat some of the elements for a roadmap, and I commented this a little bit in last forum, and this is related to the guiding principles to integrate the territorial perspective. It is wonderful that countries continue progressing in the national care systems. It is necessary that this occurs, but it is also necessary to be able to include diversity in the territories and to be able to do something with this. For this to happen, we need a series of elements that need to be fulfilled. First, transfer of power to local initiatives. When we talk about power transfer, we're talking about economic resources available to perform all these things, to be able to integrate specificities of territories with the central level, and central level is a little hard to do because the information is circular. As from the centrality, we can have public policies to the territories, interesting and revealing, to include the stock of communities in designing local plans, can also provide more wealth to progress in this care aspect with a perspective that includes rural environment. Also to conduct a right administration of expectations. The realities are different, so we need to adapt to different solutions. Co-create solutions for this diversity is a vital element. And to do so, we need to make steps in an organized manner. To install attention mechanisms that allow the permanent dialogue with citizens with regard to access and of the care system is a vital element. For this, society of care has a territorial perspective, and finally to develop participatory monitoring instruments. And here's something: we cannot generate participatory instruments if we do not look the diversity of territories. This is one of the publications included in mentioned in my work. So to recognize and distribute the reduced care as well as the implementation of public policy as everything related to funding and methodologies to reduce gaps, as I mentioned today, the cost and impact, everything related to regulatory matters, and this last publication of this year that is related to local initiatives and that gave birth to these instruments, particularly the diagnostic measures. I appreciate, I thank you for my participation. I remain available. Thank you, Patricia. Perfect change of panels, because what you present from UN Women helps us a lot to think in concrete tools of public management and the analysis of what really corresponds to us in relation to care systems. In this same perspective, I would like to collect some of the ideas of your presentation, trying to balance the discussions we have had this afternoon from the perspective of the colleagues from social organizations up to the statistical work. So I would like to collect some things you mentioned, Patricia. First thing, which is the central idea, the Alejandra's intervention started this morning, is that definitely the systems of care is a core transformational topic of the public agenda, and that measure our responsibility as governmental officers, and responsibilities of the state is to keep the centrality of this commitment of care into the public agenda for gender equality and equity in each one of our countries. Very important, the idea you mentioned in relation to synergy. We have perceived it and we have collected largely in this panel. Yes, it is about linking again the differential matrix and the public things that are proposed through a theory like the one of the system of care, and that measure to remember the dialogue of the female agenda of women organizations, and also the responsibility we have as governments to be able to collect this need for a reading from the organization. So very key here. In the same perspective, I would like to mention a concept you mentioned, and this is how we can reconstitute the reproductive aspect. This is a basic concept of the Marxist theory, but yes, it is still a pending issue in the definitions of our economies. Some colleagues, even Irene was clear about this, and consider very important is that from the social organizations, we know that 21% of the work associated to care represents 21% of GDP in the case of Colombia. Yes, how do we translate this reproductive thing into public policies that include this value? Our government has proposed structural reforms like the labor reform and the pension reform. And the debate again about the role of women in our society goes through the way we legislate and trying to collect this contribution of women in the systems of care to put it into a law is not easy. It is not easy at all. In the case of Colombia, there is a commitment, which is the first left government in our Republican history. I want to tell you this to those who maybe don't know it. It has been, this information of the systems of care has been important, and we have proposed a differential measure in the labor reform. That implies the recognition of incentive near percentage of the minimum wage that has as a concept to recognize the unpaid work of women in relation to care. This is something that is transformational in our society. Under the same perspective, I would like to mention some things that from the perspective of our leaderships as ministers and responsible parties of policy, we should have. One key concrete measures of access. Patricia mentioned this pretty well in the collection she mentioned. For us, something that is vital, included in the representations today, is the access to land. This is still a pending task in Latin American countries. For us, it is a core topic in our development plan. And we have identified that 21% of rural property gets to women, just only 21%. So it is still a very important topic for us, clear bet in this. I consider it important to include some of the points our colleague Patricia has mentioned and that are also included in other presentations. For example, the one from the Canadian colleague from the Credit Fund. It shows that if women are assured the same resources, the productivity in their agricultural chains will improve up to 20%. This is something we should take as leaders, as responsible parties of public policy for women. Likewise, the FAO data, if women get the cooperation resources, these resources are 30% more effective in rurality. I believe with this task, as leaders of the region, we need to keep to maintain this general concern. I also, from Patricia's presentation, I would like to mention two ideas in closing. they match the panel of the colleagues of social organizations. The first one is the call to integrality of our actions. Quite important to take this key idea with us. Yes, the colleagues talked about how to continue deepening in topics of well-being and health for rural women. From a holistic perspective, it's not just I took the land, the title, or the grant for the product, but how we think on an exhaustive or integrated strategies for health, women's health be introduced. The other key idea as a demonstration of integrated policies to continue thinking and strengthening the leaderships and the participation of women. Patricia, Paula mentioned this pretty well in the panel of their colleagues. And I believe that it is a common idea we should take as public policy makers, and that this perspective, the interest of the system of care is that we can release times. We are poor in time. My apologies, Irene, I'm quoting you a lot, but you said very clearly what we talk about here is overload and work. So this perspective of rights, Patricia commented, needs to go through this regard to accept their life. This overburdening has to be reduced or needs to be reduced. Our task in this perspective of integrality should be how to ensure health and education. But to ensure this health and education, we need time. Time is required, time for women. And finally, the task that corresponds to us as leaders of the cultural change. We should not lose this from sight. For a Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development like ours, most of our colleagues working in the rural sector, it's not easy to talk about cultural change. It's really difficult. We do not have actions or budgets in this matter. And I believe that definitely it is a serious challenge for us to continue thinking and how to promote cultural changes that aim to that allow gender equity be a reality for women, and that we can develop as individuals as it corresponds to us in Latin America. Thank you very much. So we're gonna make an exception to the rule because we are still missing the intervention of Luz Aro, but we have a question to ask. I don't know if we still have Patricia. Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Patricia. We have a question from the Deputy Secretary of Rural Women from the Ministry of Agricultural Development and Family Agriculture from Brazil, Mrs. Ileana Becerra de Mesquita. So we thank both 30 seconds question and 1 minute answer. My apologies for being strict with time, but we are 1 hour late. So thank you for understanding.
Na verdade, nem é uma pergunta, é consultar a Patrícia se ela pode socializar.
I would like to ask Patricia if she could socialize her presentation. It includes a lot of information, and I was not able to see it completely in clarity. Could you share it? This is what I wanted to say. So we're going to ask Patricia her presentation. Important to remember that the forum is being streaming in Spanish, English, and Portuguese. So if you want to revise the messages, you have this opportunity. And after that, we're going to share the presentations. Thank you very much. And a pleasure, Patricia. I hope we will have you in presence soon in this space.
Gracias. Envío la presentación y también el
I will send my presentation and the article included in the publication presented this morning. Thank you, Eliana. We need to close after all these brilliant presentations, and I have the honor to introduce Luz, Latin American leader. She is the executive secretary of the Network of Rural Women from Latin America and the Caribbean. And Luz will share here the progress in the agenda of rural women under the framework of the Declaration of the Inter-American Decade for the Rights of Women, Adolescents, and Girls in the Rural Environments. Luz, go ahead. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the space and the opportunity. Could you help me with the slides?
Vamos a intentar brevemente mostrar un poco.
I'm going to try to briefly show the way of the network that has been the proposal of the Declaration of the Decade. The logo upstairs is from the Red Lag that was created in 1990, and the bottom part, the one that is created is in 2019 as a technical arm. There we have, let me introduce our founder, Vanetti Almeida, the person that is standing up, our big mama of the Red Lag, and next to me is from Pernambuco, Brazil. She was our main mentor. She led the Red Lag since 1990 till 2009. So many years leading the network. And last year, she was the first executive secretary of the Red Lag. The Red Lag has since 1996 to 2023 has organized 5 big encounters. The first one in Fortaleza, Brazil in October, by the end of September 96. The second one in Tlaxcala, Mexico. The third one in Ecuador in March 2012. The fourth one in October 2017 in Panama. And the fifth one in the Coyhaique and the Chilean Patagonia. April 2023. One of the conclusions that we reached as Red Lag with our founder, we discussed a lot the identity, the belonging, and what for the network. So we said that the network was created in the encounter of in a female encounter because they realized that there were not rural women present. So all those were politicians or women from the urban sector. So she invites other people, other leaders.
And they come from all over the region, and they started with a workshop called Lighting the Fire, and then they continued to discuss how to belong to the network. So only rural women have a voice and a right to explain and propose. So we can be part of the LAC network, all those of us who are women in rural agriculture, farmers, but not, of course, large landowners, but those among us that have less opportunities and that are poorer. And also from mixed organizations, such as our irrigation boards. There's very few women there, and they don't have leading positions, and they can be part of our network. So during pandemic, we had a series of training sessions. We started in Ecuador with one from lockdown to empowerment in the province of Los Rios. Then we went to schools directly. We've gone already 5 times through the process, but in our network, we have created a training school with our pillars for our political agenda. Since the third meeting, we had large challenges. We want to ensure publicly that the UN declares or recognizes the Declaration of Rural Women, the Decade of Rural Women. And we also want to ensure that they also redress us for exclusion and other matters. And in Ecuador, preparing a political agenda with 5 thematic areas. And we've already added a new one, land, production, and work, which is what we're talking about. Water, birth, and death. It starts in the mountains, not in the capital cities. We are the guardians and stewards of it. Violence and rights is another one. political participation of women, climate change and its impact on production and nature.
Este es el camino, la ruta ya específicamente de la declaración de
This is the roadmap and the way and the declaration. In 2006, it was my dream. Just as a crazy dreamer, I suggested to Annette in Sao Paulo when we were writing a book, let's ask the UN to declare a decade for rural women. And Manette told me that is very difficult. I didn't say anything, but I still kept on with my dream, and there came the right time to do it. On the third meeting in Latin America and the Caribbean with 270 women from different countries, it was the right time. And I said, well, I have this dream. I will bring it to your consideration. And if you agree, we can move forward as a collective proposal. And so it became a proposal that was collectively approved by the 270 rural women on March 9th, 2012. And so we've continued walking the path, looking to different authorities. Ms. Bachelet, when she came to Ecuador to visit government at that point and the Congress. But then again, the pandemic hit, and so we decided to start doing webinars for Ibero-American women with the support of the Municipalistic Union from Granada.
Medio segundo para tomar agua.
Just a second to catch my breath. I had arrived there to study on gender specialty. Then I was a counsel and director. Now I'm the president and vice president for Andean countries. So the Ibero-American Union supported us in that first webinar, Rural Women Feeding the World during the pandemic. Everyone should acknowledge that the large commercial areas is not where people helped us. It's really in agriculture and in the rural areas. We've done some work from Mexico to Chile with different meetings. And in 2021, we decided to change our strategy. So we launched the beginning of the decade of rural women on our own right as a political influence, an act of political influence, but we knew that we would not progress if we did not have more allies. So we decided to have ambassadors and godmothers and godfathers for our decade of people in political power and also in international organizations. I'm not going to name the ambassadors and godmothers we have here. I don't want anyone to feel bad if they're left out. But those of you who want to be part of this cause, please, you are welcome. Feel free to do so. And what I can say is that we found support, and we finally did it with the government of Panama. We had the Minister of Mides, who supported us as ambassadors. So I added a note at the beginning of February 2022 requesting them to be the catalysts in Panama and to bring this to the president so that Panama could be the lead of the official request with the OAS, and that's how we did it. And we continued pressuring, and in October 2022, the state of Panama, through their Ministry of Foreign Affairs, declared the Decade of Rural Women to the OAS. Dr. Mariluz Castillo, the minister, had also been the president of parts of the OAS, and we didn't know when we asked her to be ambassador, but it just happened that way. So that meant that for 23rd of June 2023, we already had the support of the CIM at the OAS, the Commission on Women, and we had the support from Alejandra Mora, the Secretariat, Dr. Marinés Castillo, and then Dr. Juana. And we still have support by the Minister of Panama, who is here today. Let's give her a big hand so they continue supporting us. So on the 23rd of June, around 6 p.m. Panama time, a very dear person, one of the main advisors helping us see what to do, told me, "Are you connected, Luz? They are covering your topic now at the 23rd Assembly of Organization of American States." And so I had not turned the computer on. I was just praying and crying because I couldn't go to Washington. I didn't have the visa. So I just turned on my computer and I just saw it is declared. It is hereby declared. So I was really happy. I said, "Hallelujah, thank you. We managed to have it." And so that's the roadmap. Very quickly, there we see the declaration. It has been officialized at the OAS on this past 21st to 23rd of June in Washington. And they used all the agreements from CEDAW, Belém do Pará, and other agreements. And to that, we have to add the 2030 agenda to dignify quality of life of women in rural areas. I know I don't have much time, so I want to go quickly. So as for the third point, I would like to for each of you to read it. It states that it is encouraging SEAM to coordinate the creation of venues, actions, and activities specifically to give visibility to the situation of teenage women and girls in rural settings for the rights of all women, teenagers, and girls in rural settings of the Americas, 2024-2026. So it's already starting. We've launched this already in certain countries, in Panama, of course, because they were the main supporters. Thank you again to the minister. And this was done on April 11th. So that was the first one. Dr. Doris from Honduras also asked us to go. We launched it there, then in Guatemala, Chile in August, last week on October 8th in National Assembly of Quito, Ecuador. So again, we're asking everyone who would like to have this launched in your countries officially. We're coordinating with the Minister of Agriculture in Colombia. We are going to have our 6th network meeting, and the network continues on. But you see all the different institutions that will support this decade. And thankfully, sorry, I'm excited. The OAS did not eliminate the Latin American and Caribbean Network of Rural Women. We're there, the only civil society organization that is mentioned, as it should be, because we have been the promoters and the drivers and the dreamers for this to happen. And there we see the rest of the declaration. So again, it's there, it's real. When Dr. Marínez Castillo told me, and when we invited her to talk about violence against rural women, she gave a preamble and said to the 160 women gathered there, she said, "I will talk as ambassador, and I have to say that you have to return to your countries to pressure your authorities to gain support for this initiative, because this is a matter of state, and that's the way we will achieve this, because this has to be declared in June." That was something she said on April 25th. And I thought, it's just 2 months. Will we get there in 2 months? And we did. So we have to definitely give a big hand to everyone that supported that, even if they're not here. And this is the design of the webinar for sowing and harvesting equality. And we are included there. This decade should serve to ensure we have a better way of achieving these SDGs 1, 2, 4, and 5, as well as 13 and 17 and any other one related to this. Thank you to Aika for the opportunity. Thank you, Priscilla, and a big hand for her as well. And the president. I don't want to forget those that are dearest and that have supported us, UNDP, that has supported us during this this time, UNDP, UN Women, and Priscilla. We met her in a parallel and a side event to talk about this decade and to take it global. We want this to become public policy, plans, programs for women to really continue living in our rural areas, but with dignity, with quality services, where we can have a life that ensures that our young people and girls fall in love with rural areas. We need more human policies, technical, political, and human will from the different forms of government in different areas, states, presidents. I don't know how many women presidents we have in the Americas, but in any case, we need support from everyone and also from mid-management and local governments so that our youth does not continue to migrate. We have to make them fall in love with rural areas because unfortunately youth is now just falling prey to consumerism and leaving rural areas. We don't want that to continue. We want them to feel the need for retribution to the earth that gives us our food, that is the way we sustain the world, sustain life, and we have to forget consumerism and really give value. Something I did is that when we did our training schools, we added a module on urban-rural reciprocity. This means that when we go to large commercial areas, everyone pays. I have to say, we go to the mall and you pay and buy things. Sometimes you don't find what you have and you have to buy them there. So if I want an aubergine, I have to go there or and the like. But we go to these large malls and shopping centers and everyone pays and doesn't think about it. Nobody asks for a rebate or reduce the price. Nobody asks for a rebate when they're paying in the cashiers. But when our poor people go out to sell on the streets, in the markets, sometimes they don't even have markets because we don't have that at all. They go out in the wee hours of morning to sell products. I have had to carry fruit baskets on my back before I get to a horse that takes it to a cart and then I can sell it. And when it comes to market and there's magic done, I'm on the intermediaries and merchants. And if I don't give them to the first price they want, then my product will just die out in market. And that's not fair. And something else that I've been discussing these last days is and here we have to call FAO to continue providing their support. When our women go out to sell on the streets, they sell the products they have worked from the earth, all the different vegetables, etc. The municipal police takes their produce from them. And sometimes they even are hit or threatened with detention. And the people that have been producing this for months, working without salary, without social security, without a timetable, without bonuses, fighting the difficult situations, have to come back with a broken heart instead of having something to bring to the table. So I think we need public policies that are much more human and that really give dignity to the quality of life of our people in rural areas. Because if not, we will continue pushing this and we might see many buildings, many highways, maybe many computers and technology. And with this new whatever automated technology, all right, yeah, that might facilitate connections, but people, are they going to eat that? We will need food. So we have to really raise awareness. From the bottom up, we have to strengthen the roots to have that influence. And we have to raise awareness and have policies that really provide dignity to quality of life of women in our communities. So that's a bit of what we've done. There's been several activities. I was invited by CAF. Thank you, by the way. When we start mentioning one, then you forget about someone else. I'm sorry, but dear Claudia, thank you so much. She supported us so much from Córdoba. They will be holding the 6th meeting of ours. But CAF and UNDP, thank you so much. I was invited last year to an event in Panama. I was part of several speakers, and I was very nervous, and I didn't even know what I was going to say. But thank you so much because you give us the space. This year, I was also invited to New York. I never thought I would be able to go there. And this will be with Michelle, representative of the UNDP. So very humbly, we are making our voices be heard, but we want more and more women from our rural areas to add their voices to ours, to express what we feel, what we have, our needs, and our proposals as to how we want to be served. They never asked us, what do you want us to do for you? So the authorities now have to sit down with women and hear them, hear our needs, so that public policies and governance can really happen. This has to be with women at the very center. The different producers, farmers, not the millionaire women, because they have no problems, but the most humble people. So those in power have to be compassionate to those of us who have nothing. We have our friends from the Amazon region, and you are now working at Guayas Prefecture, but in the Amazon region, young children, when you go to the jungle, it has to be by air. You can't do it by land or sea or anything. And there's so much disease. They're just drinking muddy water. They have really big bellies. I once came to a community and I wanted to have water, and it was dark sludge or mud. Everything was muddy, and this is the water they used. But maybe they thought that in another place I would find better water, and it was the same case everywhere. Those are the conditions our communities are living in. And that's why for them, as long as I live and breathe, I will continue calling on everyone to raise awareness, to bring social, political, and economic human justice. I believe that we have to invest on training schools at UN Women, UNDP, and everyone. Because the first school of training that I attended in 96, 97, as political coordinator, I had to walk to a place where a car would pick me up, and then having to go look for women in their homes and asking them to come to the training. And they would say, no, it's best for my son to go, for my husband to go, or even my daughter. Why don't you want to come? You are a leader. Well, I can't read. Again, that is our reality. And it really hurts me because I went to Colombia and I had a woman tell me, your story is like mine. She said this about 5 months ago when I was there. And she said, I only went 2 years to school. I was sold at 15 years to a man for a plate of food, and he would beat me up. I had to divorce. I have 5 children. Then I went to live with another man. He was killed. And all my life, I've wanted to work as seamstress. I have not been able to because I haven't gone to school. So we have to find a way for her to finish her school, her primary education, and then once she does so, continue working as she would like to become a seamstress. So study, because there are women. I've had several writing to me. I also came to a conference in Parrita, and they helped me buy my ticket 2 days before to come to the conference. So,
Dos minutitos para
Ya,
cerrar.
gracias.
Gracias.
Me ha dicho, Luz, escuchándote,
and she
ahora
said,
sí voy a
Luz,
poder acabar
hearing
mis
you,
clases.
I will go back to school.
De eso se trata.
And
Que
that's what
lleguemos a
it's
la
about.
gente,
We want to
que
reach
hagamos ver.
people.
Cuando yo decidí acabar mi
When
primaria
I
a los
decided to
22, 23
finish
años,
my
ya a
primary
los
school at
35
22, 23 years, and then go to school when I had my children already, my husband said, you're too old, you shouldn't study. And he really supports me. But I said, I'm not old. Let me study, because if God gives me a long life, I want to be smart.
Pero es que es así. Y yo tuve que decirme a mí misma,
And I
Luz,
had
para
to
que no
say,
sientas que estás
Luz,
quitándole el pan de la mesa ni del marido, no los hijos.
to
Aunque no te pongas un trapo
feel
todo
that you're
el año,
not taking this away from your husband, you have to do everything you can. And even if you don't have shoes, you are going to study. And that's why I was able to graduate in 1993 as a bachelor. And then I wanted my children to study, and I wanted them to go to university. I also studied in university. And that also helped me to have a virtual diploma from Glaxo. And I did it virtually even if I didn't have an internet at home. I had to print out 100 to 500 pages per week to study while my family was asleep. And then I continued my studies. I studied up until my 70th year. I'm now 75, and I work on these other matters. So again, let's continue working. This is all that we've done with SIM at OAS. We have a working group, an advisory group with rural women. We have women from our network and other organizations. And again, training schools are a priority. It's a way to invest in ourselves. And it's the way we can really find freedom, power, and action. It's only with education. If I don't have the knowledge, I won't be able to achieve that. So what comes next?
Por favor, yo quisiera que alguien me ayude a leer esa. ¿A quién le delegaré para que me haga el
Me animo a leerla. ¿La
I'll
ayudo?
read it out, okay.
Te delego, Priscila, por favor.
Gracias. Entonces, con esto,
So
Luz
with
nos
that,
menciona que
as
esperamos
Luz said,
contar con la
we
voluntad
are
humana,
expecting to
técnica y
have the
eficaz de
human,
cada uno de
technical, and
ustedes,
political will
queridas
of each of
autoridades y
you,
sus
dear
equipos de
authorities and
trabajo.
working
Las
teams.
mujeres rurales
Rural
no
women
somos
are
una
not
carga,
alone.
somos
We are
fundamentales en el
fundamental
cuidado y
in the care
sostenimiento del
and
territorio y la
sustainment of
soberanía alimentar
territories
frente al cambio
and
climático.
food
Nos vean,
sovereignty in the face
consideren
of climate
tales
change.
aliadas
See ourselves,
estratégicas para
consider
superar la
us as
pobreza
strategic
y el hambre
allies
en el
to
mundo.
overcome poverty and
Cada esfuerzo
hunger
y
in the
centavo
world.
invertido en los
Every
derechos
effort
de las
and
mujeres rurales
cent invested in
es
the rights of rural
sembrar
women
en tierra
means
fértil.
fertile
Contamos con
soil will
ustedes.
find your
Muchas
seeds.
gracias,
We
Luz.
are counting on you.
Bueno, les dije que era cerrar con broche de oro.
Well, as I
Esta
said, it
sesión
was
de
going to
panelistas, muchísimas
close
gracias, Luz,
with the
porque
best
efectivamente muestra
way.
que
Thank you
las
so much,
mujeres
Luz.
rurales
You're showing that rural
liderando
women
realmente pueden
are
no solo
leaders
llama
and
por
that they can
desecho,
light a
sino
fire
muchas
for a
otras
decade,
llaman
but
más.
many other
Así que gracias por
flames.
esa,
So thank
por ese
you so
compromiso
much
también,
for
Luz, con
your
el que cerraste el
commitment
mensaje.
and the way you closed.
Vamos a la mundialización. Con el apoyo de ustedes, vamos hacia la mundialización. Mientras aterricen territorios.
And now let's take this global, as since we already have the decade,
Muchas
let's
gracias.
take it
Con
global.
esto,
Thank you.
Con esto, gracias a
And
Ileana y
with
a
that,
Luz.
thank you to
Es
Ileana and
difícil ir
Luz.
cerrando este espacio. Ha sido un espacio demasiado
It's hard to close
enriquecedor.
today's work. It has been so
Vamos a tener ahora
fulfilling.
un ratito también un espacio
We
para
will now have
conversar más y
time
mañana
to
tenemos otro
continue
espacio también de
talking later
intercambio.
on, and we will have
Así
some
que con
more time for
esto
exchanges.
quisiera ir
With
dando la
that,
palabra a
I now
nuestro
give the
director de
floor to
cooperación
our Director
técnica
of
del
Technical
ICA, el señor
Cooperation at
Mohamed
IICA, Mr.
Ibrahim,
Mohammad
para
Ibrahim,
el cierre
to
para el día de hoy.
close the day.
Buenas tardes.
Good afternoon. I know this has been a quite intense day till the last minute, so I really thank everyone that has contributed in giving presentations and making comments in relation to the experience and lessons learned on a very important topic where there are still many things to do. There's no question that when we see the result of gender issues and the SDG number 5, we see that we are still late in relation to the progress, in relation to the forecast to achieve the objectives. If we continue at this pace, they will be achieved in 2070. So we need to find a way to speed up the processes to achieve this. Violence problems were mentioned, economic gaps, gaps in political participation, and problems of payment in relation to the wages women receive versus the wages of men. You also mentioned policy problems in the labor market. There are cases where, as countries, as you mentioned, progresses with policies of care child marriage policies and how to install these processes. When I see these conversations and the experiences at the level of a community or experiences at the country level where the policies are progressing, and therefore we need to know how we are systematizing these experiences in the countries to understand what are the factors that lead to success, or what are the factors that lead into failure, because it is important to learn what we are not doing correctly. You mentioned the need of better quantification. I do not know the topic very well, but the question is it that we have well-defined methodologies to quantify the importance and the contribution about care in the rural economy and the economies of the countries? This is something you could discuss. You also discuss about education topics, the importance to have more skills by promoting more leaders. You showed examples on how women are important in the agriculture and the domestic gardens and cooperatives such as coffee, including progresses in the territory promoting incubators. I believe the concept of incubator is good, and I have had experience and that showed that the women's role and the importance in these incubators. Also, there are countries with advocacy plan has migrated in relation to services, mentioning the problem of agricultural insurance. There are barriers for women to have access to funding, and these are topics we need to discuss. You also show examples where children are participating in the cooperative case and the existing gaps in relation to the non-repression in rural areas versus urban areas where there is a difference of 8% more or less. It is important to see what are the metrics that is going to be used to measure the impact of care. I want to end by mentioning some topics, and I put it to your consideration and discussion for tomorrow. The last presentation, I forgot the name, my apologies for that. We have seen structural changes in populations. We are seeing a migration from rural areas to urban areas, particularly the young people. Implications of the aging of population. In some countries more advanced than others, where, for example, a country like Costa Rica, the reposition rate is lower. So Costa Rica is following the European model. So what are the implications in this topic under discussion? Other topics, there's a lot of diversity in the territories, cultural differences, more vulnerable groups. I believe that the single mothers are the most vulnerable group in this context, and therefore what is the differential policy, what is the differentiated strategy we are using to see this? Another topic is, if we want to have a quantification and more valuation, is it that we have a business model to convince the policy makers or stakeholders from the private sector or other stakeholders when they have to invest in this topic, showing the benefits in the rural areas and the economic growth in rural communities. With this, I want to thank each one of you for your presentations and your contributions, and the team that is leading, Priscila Zúñiga, and are participating here. Thank you very much. Thank you, Director. And with this, we conclude the first day. Anxious to have the second journey tomorrow. Those who were with us in the social media, we want to thank you and also the panelists that work virtually. So we are closing here, but we would like to recognize each contribution that you have made and are making from the different scopes of actions to contribute to gender equality in the agri-food systems. Now we invite you to watch two big initiatives, the CIMAC and Fab Lab. And after that, we invite you to an encounter we're going to have in the lobby of the Institute. Our assistants will guide you. And thank you so much. See you tomorrow.